Chapter 1032. The Heavenly Fire God Slaughtering Array was the river and river heavenly gates array that Li Yuanfang had created by comprehending the four symbols heaven opening scripture. It was an array formation used to open the southern heavenly gate. Among the four symbols of earth, water, fire and wind, it had the strongest direct destructive and offensive power. Li Yuanfang's river and river heavenly gates array, opening the four heavenly gates, and setting up the four major arrays were created by him, through comprehending the four symbols heaven opening scripture, and referring to other powerful array formations. Opening the eastern heavenly gate, and setting up the light dust array incorporated Li Yuanfang's understanding of the yin and yang life and death array. Opening the western heavenly gate, and setting up the Black Sea Immortal Entrapment Array, incorporated Li Yuanfang's understanding of the Yingzhou Immortal Mountain's nameless ancient heaven and earth array. Opening the southern heavenly gate, and setting up the Heavenly Fire God Slaughtering Array incorporated some of Li Yuanfang's personal understanding of the Heavenly Punishment Sword Array. Hearing Lin Feng ask about his Heavenly Fire God Slaughtering Array, Li Yuanfang's expression became serious. It's basically completed, but there are still some areas that need to be adjusted. Because of this, Li Yuanfang did not use this array formation in the ancient desolate star ocean this time. He could not help but point out the flaws in other people's array formations, let alone his own array formation. Unless it was a life and death situation, Li Yuanfang would definitely not use an incomplete array formation. Lin Feng nodded his head, lightly pointing out with his finger. A stream of black gas danced and circled in the air, like a peerless path of the sword, but also like it was drawing thousands of formation patterns, turning into a huge formation. The ferocious intent condensed and did not dissipate, making people feel intimidated. But Li Yuanfang stared at that black energy in a daze, his two hand signs continuously changing. Wave after wave of mana also flowed in the air, outlining a faintly discernible formation. It was completely different from the formation outlined by Lin Feng's black energy, but also seemed to be faintly related. Seeing this, Lin Feng smiled and nodded. "You're worth teaching." After pondering for a while, Li Yuanfang returned to his senses and bowed to Lin Feng. "I've thought through many things. The Heavenly Fire God Slaughtering Array will be completed in a few days." Lin Feng clapped his hands and smiled. "Very good. That way, there's only one array left for your river and Luo Luo Heavenly Gate Array. That array formation will depend on the 9 Glory Sky formation." A faint smile also appeared on Li Yuanfang's serious face. He nodded vigorously. "Yes, Master. This disciple will definitely do his best. The thing I am most proud of in my life is having disciples like you. The most thing in Master is Qi and Saint King Stage. Stage Godly subs Fire Stage God, Saint Dragon Battle God, God Chun Stage Formation. Said Mountain Yang Split Stage. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. After Li Yuanfang left, Lin Feng's Brontosaurus doppelganger and God of War doppelganger sat in front of him. A ray of light flew out from the God of War doppelganger's forehead and floated in the void. It looked like a tiny speck of dust, but it also looked like a huge and complicated array. It was Lin Feng's Yin and Yang Life and Death Array. Lin Feng looked at the Yin and Yang Life and Death Array and thought to himself, "My Yin and Yang Life and Death Array still has room for improvement." Using the most basic formation diagram as a comparison, the Yin and Yang Life and Death Array that Lin Feng used as his Xianmen Tianzong Mountain Gate formation was one of the most powerful formations in the entire Great Tianyuan world. Of course, sometimes the Mountain Gate formation did not seem to live up to its name. Most of the time, the Yin and Yang Life and Death Array followed Lin Feng, either in his original body or his doppelganger. In short, it was basically carried around by Lin Feng. This was also one of the advantages and specialties of the Yin and Yang Life and Death Array. It was not dependent on geographical location. Although the formation also borrowed the power of heaven and earth, its position was not limited. That was why people often scolded Lin Feng and Xianmen Tianzong for being shameless behind their backs, carrying the Mountain Gate formation everywhere. Although this was also related to the special situation of Yujing Mountain, the core foundation of the celestial sect of Xianmen. As a great formation of the celestial sect of Xianmen, The yin and yang life and death formation was indeed less used to guard the celestial sect of Xianmen. However, it was precisely this relatively small number of cases that reflected some problems. In the eyes of many people, the current celestial sect of Xian was the most difficult sect to break through in the entire divine land. The premise was that the master of the celestial sect of Xian, Lin Feng, was on Yujing Mountain. The reason for this was that, firstly, Lin Feng's cultivation was strong enough. Secondly, Yujing Mountain was hidden in the hollow and difficult to find. The mountain gate formation, the yin and yang life and death array, became incidental. In the battle to destroy Xianxian, Lin Feng was not on the mountain, and Yujing Mountain unexpectedly showed up. Although it was protected by the yin and yang life and death array, it was still in danger when facing the allied forces of destroying Xianxian. It needed Xiao Yan and the others to fight bravely. Everything in the world had its advantages and disadvantages. The yin and yang life and death array was not limited by geography. It could move freely, which was its advantage. However, it had a big shortcoming, which was that it had to be presided by someone, and its power was closely related to the ability of the presiding person. In the battle to destroy Xianxian, with the help of Zhu Yi's dragon rising skill, Li Yuanfang was only at the virtual soul stage, not even a real Yuanying stage. If Li Yuanfang, who was at the middle Yuanying stage, was in charge of this formation 5 years later, he might not be able to turn the situation around, but the war situation would definitely change. If Lin Feng was in charge of it, the situation would be even more different. After Lin Feng put in his own 49 yin and yang dust to suppress the formation key, the awkward situation was eased, and the power of the yin and yang life and death array was further improved. However, the problem still existed. It could not be seen in ordinary times, but when facing a strong enemy of the same level, it needed the most subtle control to give full play to the changing power of the formation. Most of the formations in the world needed a presiding person, and at the same time, the strength of the presiding person affected the power of the formation. However, formations like the yin and yang life and death array that relied on the presiding person were really rare. And it was not only the problem of relying on the presiding person, but also the formation treasures of the yin and yang life and death array. Not only does Xiao Yan feel that the outer heart furnace is unable to keep up with the situation, unable to keep up with the increase in his own pill refining level, right now Lin Feng also feels that a portion of the treasures originally used to set up the yin and yang life and death formation can still be used, but the other portion is somewhat unable to keep up. If it were not for the 49 yin and yang dust to suppress the core of the formation key, the problem would be more obvious. This was not because it was easy for the opponent to see through the flaws, but because Lin Feng, as the controller of the formation, gradually began to notice the imperfections of the formation as his cultivation increased, and his attainments in the formation became more profound. For a formation that did not rely on the terrain, the quality of the formation treasures and materials would also directly affect the power of the formation. A typical example was the 9 Lights sky-shattering formation. It was a pity that this formation had been lost for many years. It finally saw the light of day in the hands of great sage Qiongqi, but in fact, it had never shown its peak power. It was like the supreme void yin and yang formation of the Taishu Temple during the last war between the two realms, and the Mahavairokkana formation with the golden bodies of the 10 disciples of Gautama Buddha. That was what the yin and yang life and death array should be like in Lin Feng's mind. Although people praised the yin and yang life and death array as being comparable to the supreme void yin and yang formation, the Mahavairokkana formation, and the great immortal manifestation sword formation, Lin Feng himself knew the strength of the yin and yang life and death array best. In terms of the formation diagram, the yin and yang life and death array was indeed not weaker than the supreme void yin and yang formation, and the Mahavairokkana formation. But honestly speaking, when everyone was at their peak state, the yin and yang life and death array, which was still flawed, was still inferior. In the past, the Mahavairokkana formation had the golden bodies of the 10 disciples of Gautama Buddha to suppress the 10 directions. Its power reached the peak and manifested the central whirling world. It was recognized as the strongest defensive formation in the divine land. In terms of pure defensive power, it was even better than the supreme void yin and yang formation. Coupled with the powerful figures of Buddhism presiding over it, And the Great Lane Temple's creation magic treasure, Mount Meru. Its defensive power could really be said to be at the peak. If it wasn't for the fact that Yuhuang Heaven Sea had broken through in the previous Great War between the two worlds and shattered Mount Meru, killing all the experts of the Great Lane Temple, who were at the third tier of the Golden Body realm and above, and the golden bodies of the 10 disciples of Gautama Buddha, it would have been impossible for the Allied forces to break through the Mahavairocana formation during the Buddha vanquishing war. Even if the Supreme Formation breaking drum achieved creation, there was no hope of breaking through the almost indestructible defense, let alone the help of the Supreme Formation breaking drum. After entering the ancient era, if there was anyone in the human world of the Divine Land who had absolute confidence in breaking through the Mahavairocana formation in its peak state, it would probably be the Haotian mirror in its perfect state. Even the current Lin Feng didn't dare to say that he would definitely be able to do it if he went all out. The other formation in the Divine Land that was recognized as the strongest one, the Supreme Void Yin and Yang formation, relied on the geographical conditions of White Cloud Mountain. In the past, White Cloud Mountain was the center where the spiritual qi of the entire Divine Land gathered. The Supreme Void Yin and Yang formation borrowed this geographical advantage and was abnormally powerful. However, as the spiritual qi of the Divine Land changed, this geographical advantage gradually disappeared. There was no lack of formation experts among the ancestors of the Taishu Temple. They were constantly adjusting their formations to adapt to the new geographical conditions. In order to make up for the changes in the geographical conditions, the experts of the Taishu Temple spent a long time researching and came up with an improvement plan. Using manpower to make up for the geographical conditions, the 12 peak experts of the Taishu Temple entered the formation to oversee the Supreme Void Yin and Yang formation, greatly increasing the power of the formation. The magic power of the cultivators and the formation fused, supporting each other. If the Haotian mirror was in its perfect state, it could even make the Supreme Void Yin and Yang formation temporarily shift space and leave White Cloud Mountain. In the previous war between the two worlds, the 12 previous generations of the Taishu Temple, and even the elders 2 generations before that worked together to set up the formation. Then, with the help of the Haotian mirror, it moved above the Great Thunderclap Temple and fought with the Haotian mirror in the Yuhuang Heavenly Sea. That was also the peak state of the Supreme Void Yin and Yang formation since the beginning of the present era. A formation diagram was the foundation of a formation, but how high a formation could reach was determined by many factors. Positive examples were the Supreme Void Yin and Yang formation and the Vairocana formation. Negative examples were the Great Immortal Myriad Phenomenon Sword formation of the Mount Shu Sword sect and the 9 Glory Sky Shattering formation of the Great Sage Cheongqi. Even the Great Immortal Myriad Phenomenon Sword formation would have a difference in power depending on whether or not the accumulated sword qi on the sword peak was activated, and whether or not there was a Celestial Sky Sword formation. Lin Feng was confident that his power was now established, and that he was no longer someone that others could easily bully. However, he didn't think that he was invincible in the world. The problem Lin Feng was thinking about now was not to let his Yin and Yang formation of life and death become a negative example. Chapter 1033. In fact, Lin Feng had been seeking to further improve his Yin and Yang formation. Suppressing the formation I with 49 Yin and Yang dust was only the first step, or a substitute. Before that, Lin Feng had been waiting for the embryo of the magic treasure of fate in the Yin-Yang Sea under Yujing Mountain to fully mature, and then he would refine it. If he could have a magic treasure of fate to suppress the formation I of the Yin and Yang formation, the power of the Yin and Yang formation would definitely be improved. Moreover, the problem of the host would be further alleviated. The original spirit of the magic treasure of fate was not visible, like the will of the world, but it did not mean that it had no intelligence. But how rare was a magic treasure of fate? The golden Permitha bridge was Zhu Yi's personal treasure, but the light ball in the Yin-Yang Sea was still far away, and no one knew when it would mature. But now, Lin Feng did not have to wait, because there was a ready-made one in front of him. Lin Feng's fingers gently stroked the body of Ding of Shenzhou. Although he now controlled Ding of Shenzhou, it would take some time to adjust Ding of Shenzhou and the Yin and Yang formation completely, and it was not something that could be done overnight. But compared to the previous situation where even a clever housewife could not cook without rice, Lin Feng was now very satisfied and happy. With Ding of Shenzhou as the core of the formation I, the power of the yin and yang formation would definitely increase steadily, and it was not a waste of Ding of Shenzhou, but a strong combination, which might produce an effect of 1 + 1 greater than 2. Not only would Ding of Shenzhou improve the power of the yin and yang formation, but when the yin and yang formation manifested the change of life and death and turned death to life, it would produce a very strong life force, which would be of great help to Ding of Shenzhou in refining elixirs. In the heavenly return golden pavilion of Xianmen Tianzong's elixir room, there was a simple yin and yang formation that Lin Feng had set up himself, which only took the change of life and death. Moreover, the yin and yang life and death formation had changed the world. With the power of the earth and thick earth, it was compatible with Ding of Shenzhou and could nourish Ding of Shenzhou. Of course, due to the characteristics of Ding of Shenzhou itself, the yin and yang life and death formation might not be as flexible as before. Although it was not to the extent that the Mountain Gate Great Formation could not be completely moved, it was best not to move it frequently if they wanted to combine the two forces to exert the greatest power. This would allow Ding of Shenzhou, who had returned to the Divine Land, sufficient time to absorb a large amount of spiritual energy from the vast thousand worlds. Although Ding of Shenzhou was the #1 Dharma treasure in alchemy, it had more than one function. In addition, when their forces were concentrated together, they would be at a disadvantage when they needed an advantage in numbers and range. Where there are gains, there are losses. How to grasp the advantages and disadvantages, how to turn disadvantages into advantages, and how to adapt to the situation. After Ding of Shenzhou fixed the formation I of the yin and yang life and death formation, if they wanted to further enhance the formation's power, they had to work hard on the formation treasures. In theory, there were 12 treasures for the formation of the yin and yang life and death formation, which corresponded to the 12 principles of the 6 changes of life and death, light and darkness, yin and yang, void and reality, and eternity and instant. The 12 treasures that Lin Feng currently used were the universal purple qi, and the central divine light of earth produced by the living earth, which corresponded to the changes of heaven and earth. The great freedom heavenly robe of light was the body after the original spirit was destroyed, and the solitary dark skeleton corresponded to the changes of light and darkness. The dark flower amethyst and the pure yang real fire corresponded to the changes of yin and yang. The yuanshan ancient skin, and the sky illuminating stone corresponded to the changes of void and reality, and the instantaneous divine sand and the eternal light corresponded to the changes of eternity and instant. Before the heart of Wudong gave birth to little Lin Tong, the combination of the heart of Wudong and the deathly stone corresponded to the changes of life and death. Later, after little Lin Tong was born, Lin Feng found another treasure with a strong life force, the Octotera Spirit Stone, to replace it. Among these treasures, some of them were very suitable at that time. Their quality was extraordinary, and they were also rare treasures. However, as Lin Feng's cultivation rose day by day, and his status rose higher and higher, Xianmen Tianzong's resources became more and more abundant. A portion of the formation treasures were no longer able to keep up with Lin Feng's progress. At this time, if he wanted to effectively increase the strength of the yin and yang life and death formation, he would need to upgrade the hardware. The universal purple qi and central divine light of earth didn't need to be replaced. He just needed to increase the total amount according to his discretion. The same logic was also applicable to the pure young true fire, instant divine sand, and eternal light. Among them, the instant divine sand needed to be refined into instant radiance. When he replaced the Octotera Spirit Stone back then, Lin Feng had already considered this day. Therefore, he planned ahead and spent a great deal of effort to find these treasures. The abundance of life force was sufficient to satisfy him. However, the other treasures basically needed to be replaced. Although the nether flower amethyst was an item left behind by Yu Huang, its value lay in the information regarding the nether flower of Yudu contained within, and not in the material itself. Although it was a rare item of pure yin from what he could see now, its quality was still very high. However, its quantity was still insufficient. The primordial mirage ancient skin and the soul dark skeleton were both extremely rare, and their quality was complete with pure energy. However, the great sages of the demon race that they were born from were only at the level of undying demon souls. The situation was similar to the netherflower amethyst. In terms of quality, it could still satisfy Lin Feng's standards. However, in terms of quantity, or rather, in terms of size, it was a little too small. It was the same situation for the Death Energy Stone and Heavenly Illumination Stone. And the difference in quantity was even greater. Although the Great Carefree Light Heavenly Robe was originally a transformation-level magic treasure, the primordial spirit of the magic treasure had been destroyed by Lin Feng with a slap. Now only an empty shell was left, and from the looks of it, it wasn't very powerful anymore. Oh, everything else is fine, but it's not easy to find something to replace the Heavenly Illumination Stone and the Death Energy Stone. An evil smile suddenly appeared on Lin Feng's face. If I throw that Azura battle knife in as a replacement for the Death Energy Stone, it'll be more suitable. However, if he causes trouble, it'll be troublesome. After all, it's a Mahayana-level magic treasure. It'll be a pity to destroy the primordial spirit of the magic treasure with a slap. He flipped his palm, and a jet-black battle knife appeared in his hand. The killing nature of the battle knife was extremely ferocious. When the killing intent spread out, those with weaker cultivation would go crazy and be devoured by their own killing intent, turning into a madman who only knew how to fight and kill. Even primordial spirit realm cultivators would feel their hearts tremble. However, Lin Feng could even control the White Tiger Great Sage, so why would he care about the Azura battle knife? Grasped in his hand, the killing intent around the Azura battle knife overflowed in all directions. It wasn't intentionally suppressed, but the killing intent was limited to a very small area and couldn't leak out. At this moment, the Azura battle knife was vibrating gently, so it clearly heard Lin Feng's words just now. Although it was bloodthirsty and crazy, after falling into Lin Feng's hands for so many years, the edges and corners of the Azura battle knife had basically been polished. At this moment, when it heard Lin Feng's half-truths, half-lies, half-jokes, and half-ultimatum, it felt slightly uneasy. After a long time, the Azura battle knife finally calmed down completely and stopped vibrating, expressing its submission to Lin Feng. Lin Feng smiled. Wave after wave of mana was injected into the Shura battle blade. After a moment, the Shura battle blade, which was completely black and flashed with a dark red light, was plated with a layer of purple light. After casually throwing the Azura battle knife into the Yin and Yang life and death formation, Lin Feng began to adjust the other treasures in the formation. Even with Lin Feng's current wealth, it was extremely extravagant to use a Mahayana-grade magic weapon as a formation treasure. But Lin Feng believed that the Yin and Yang life and death formation would make it all worthwhile. The treasures used to set up the formation had been replaced, and if he wanted to make the formation reach its best state, he would need to make constant adjustments, especially for some minor adjustments. However, it would not take too much effort to do so, but it would take a long time. Lin Feng didn't know what the people of the Taishu Temple were doing in the Star Sea at this moment, but his disciples were focused on cultivating and refining the power of the star remains. After they refined the star remains, Lin Feng, who had mastered the gate of Star Sea, could send them into the desolate ancient Star Sea at any time to accept the baptism of starlight and further improve. Yu Hongyan was not the only one who had broken through his own bottleneck, and could break through to the late stage of yuanying at any time. Tang Jun, Zhou Yunsong, Lu Xiaofeng, and Li Xingfei had also broken through their original bottlenecks and could go to the next level. Among them, Lu Xiaofeng and Li Xingfei directly began closed-door training after returning to the mountain. They first passed the chilly wind tribulation and reached the late stage of golden elixir. Then they would refine the star remains and enter the desolate ancient Star Sea to accept the baptism. As for Tang Jun and Zhou Yunsong, they both controlled their own advancement and were not in a hurry to form their nascent souls. Instead, they first refined the star remains and then entered the desolate ancient Star Sea for the baptism. In the golden elixir period, they would completely solidify their foundation and accumulate to the most abundant degree. Then they would pass the void thunder tribulation in one go and form the yuanying period. Lin Feng, Xiao Yan, and the others all had a praising attitude towards their disciples for being able to restrain their anxiety and remain calm. Lin Feng was not anxious about this. Victory was already in front of him, and he still had a lot of time. He was now seriously considering delaying the submission of the mission, so that he could obtain a better special reward for the main mission. Not long after, good news came from the snowy Wind Valley. Yu Hongyan had successfully advanced to the late stage of yuanying. Soon after, news also came from Fun Tianya and Fan Linju. Lu Xiaofeng and Li Xingfei had successfully passed the Yin Wind tribulation and reached the late stage of Golden Elixir. They had taken a solid step towards advancing to the yuanying period in the future. As disciples who had been accepted by Xianmen Tianzong the first time the sect opened its doors, they were also the first batch of true disciples. In the past, Lu Xiaofeng and Li Xingfei's performances were quite good. However, due to various reasons, they were gradually overtaken by Little Lin Tong, Tang Jun, Han Yang, Yang Tai, and the others. It was not just the two of them. Yan Wuwei and Zhao Huan were still stuck in the middle stage of Golden Elixir. Su Yinxing had disappeared from everyone's sight. Although Ing Rosa was the second-generation true disciple who had reached core formation after Dao Yuding, he was now being surpassed by Tang Jun and Zhou Yunsong in terms of cultivation speed. However, their mentality was still stable. They were not eager for quick success or jealous or dissatisfied. With Ing Rosa in the lead, they still maintained their competitive spirit and fighting spirit. This situation was naturally what Lin Feng, Xiao Yan, and the others were happy to see. Under the mysterious sky treasure tree, Zhu Yi's Haoyang clone stood in front of Lin Feng. In the next moment, a crack appeared in the void. Xiao Yan, Shi Tianhao, Wang Lin, and the others stepped out and greeted Lin Feng. Lin Feng casually said, "Xiao Yi's side has some gains." Hearing this, everyone looked at Zhu Yi's Haoyang clone. Zhu Yi nodded at them. "I found out. The key should be his parents." Chapter 1034. Parents. Yu Hongyan raised his red eyebrows slightly and looked at Zhu Yi's Haoyang clone. Zhu Yi nodded at her. "That's right. His parents seem to be ordinary mortals and have no cultivation at all. They even managed to deceive us from the very beginning." But in fact, his parents can only be said to be ordinary mortals now, but they weren't in the past. Luo Qinggu pondered and said, "Lost their cultivation? But there should still be traces left. Senior brother, you guys should be able to detect it." Her expression suddenly changed slightly. Unless, Li Yuanfang's gaze moved and he said, "The Supreme Wang Qing Dao." Yu Hongyan let out a breath and nodded. If one fails to cultivate the Supreme Wang Qing Dao, their Dao heart will be broken and their cultivation will be lost. They will really be no different from ordinary mortals. Even with our current cultivation, it's difficult to detect it. She looked at Zhu Yi, second senior brother. "How did you verify it?" Zhu Yi said silently, "Although I haven't seen the real Supreme Wang Qing Dao, I've collected a lot of information about this Dao technique over the years. Although there aren't many useful things, I know the characteristics of cultivating the Supreme Wang Qing Dao. Although it's not good to be prejudiced, since we can roughly determine its origin, there are at least clues to follow." After thinking about the characteristics of the Supreme Wang Qing Dao, we started to investigate from this line of thought. Zhu Yi's eyes were filled with admiration. After the couple lost their cultivation, they left White Cloud Mountain and lived like ordinary people. They worked hard and had children. At that time, they naturally couldn't have known that their children would have such a mission today. The other party was also very careful and didn't leave many flaws. They basically never contacted the couple, nor did they secretly help them. They didn't use magic to affect their minds. They almost didn't have any contact at all. At this point, Zhu Yi shook his head. "But since we've locked onto the target and have a clear idea, we can naturally find some clues." Before this couple lost their cultivation, they were both disciples of the Taishu Temple. Since young, they've been wholeheartedly cultivating on White Cloud Mountain and didn't do production. Although it's not that they don't work hard, once they fall from the clouds to the mortal world, they lose all their cultivation and become ordinary mortals again. How can they adapt so quickly? At the side, Wang Lin's expression was calm as he quietly said, "Now that they are used to this kind of life, they are naturally no different from true mortals. However, when they first left White Cloud Mountain and reintegrated into the secular world, no matter how fast they adapted, No matter how short the time, there must be a process. Even if they had similar experiences before joining the sect, they would still be rusty if they hadn't done it for many years. It's even harder to change their mentality. Zhu Yi nodded. That's right. So I followed the trajectory of their lives and searched in reverse. I found the place where they first returned to the secular world and integrated into the lives of mortals. The other party is really meticulous. They even thought of this possibility. But after all, they didn't plan this from the beginning. They only chose the couple as the candidates after they had a plan. At that time, it had been many years since the couple left White Cloud Mountain. So, as the world changes with the flow of people, they didn't manage to clean up the initial traces. I still found a flaw. Shi Tianhao frowned slightly. Second senior brother, there's a problem. If the couple left White Cloud Mountain, they would no longer be able to get any protection or help from the sect. They would almost be kicked out of the sect. They could only work hard to make a living. They would fall from the clouds to the bottom of the valley. In this way, would they still have any sense of belonging to the Taishu temple? The other party chose them and their children as spies to lurk in our sect. In order to avoid our detection, they tried not to contact us. How could they guarantee that they could control the family of three? Shi Tianhao asked doubtfully. Coercion? It's useless, right? Wouldn't we be able to protect their family if they told us secretly? There was something complicated in Zhu Yi's eyes. Slowly he said, Junior brother, it's normal for you to have such doubts. I had the same doubts in the beginning. It was only when I learned more about the Supreme Wangqing Dao that I gradually understood the problem. Oh. The others looked at Zhu Yi. Zhu Yi explained. If one fails to cultivate the Supreme Wangqing Dao, their Dao heart will be shattered. It will cause a cultivator to lose all their cultivation and be no different from a mortal. Moreover, when they lose their cultivation, their foundation will be completely destroyed. They won't be able to switch to other Dao techniques even if they want to. Everyone nodded. They knew about the situation. The Taishu temple had been in the Divine Land for many years. Although it often stayed away from the world, some information had still spread and was known to the outside world. However, the Supreme Wangqing Dao doesn't completely cut off the path for the disciples with broken Dao hearts. Zhu Yi continued. If they can regain the true essence of the Supreme Wangqing Dao, it's possible for their cultivation to gradually recover. It's even possible for them to recover completely within a day. Xiao Yan and the others revealed a look of understanding. So that's how it is indeed a wondrous Dao technique. Zhu Yi said. After the analysis of the predecessors of the Taishu temple, to regain the true essence of the Supreme Wangqing Dao, one has to first obtain emotions and then forget them. Returning to the secular world and returning to one's true nature is the most effective way. Since it's returning to one's true nature, it's impossible for it to be just for show. Naturally, one has to truly integrate into the secular world. Wang Lin said softly. As for whether it is to recover one's cultivation, or to waste the last of one's time and hope on daily necessities, rice, oil, and salt, it all depends on the cultivator themselves. Zhu Yi's gaze had already completely recovered its calmness at this time. Because there is no other way apart from this, and also because there is no way to switch to other Dao methods, so every Void Temple cultivator who failed in the path of Supreme Wangqing will choose this path, hoping to make a comeback. Except for those who are expelled from the sect. The soul imprints left behind by the Dao techniques they learned before will be completely erased by a secret technique. They'll truly be left to fend for themselves. The others looked at Zhu Yi and did not say anything. They sighed in their hearts. Xiao Yan rubbed his eyebrows lightly. So that couple actually still has a sense of belonging to the Taishu temple. They have the hope of returning to the sect and White Cloud Mountain. So they don't need any restrictions. As long as there's an order or a mission, they'll work hard to complete the task on their own. Presumably, if the task is completed well, there'll be other rewards. Wang Lin said in a low voice. Although it's still unknown whether they can recover their cultivation or not, after experiencing the high and mighty in the past, they've now fallen to the mortal world. As long as there's a glimmer of hope for them to return to the peak, they'll work hard for it. Because of the uniqueness of the supreme Wangqing Dao, they can't switch to other Dao techniques. So continuing on the path of the supreme Wangqing Dao, and continuing to follow the Taishu Temple is their only chance. Zhu Yi said, generally speaking, for such disciples, although they're allowed to return to the secular world, the Taishu Temple will also keep an eye on them in secret, in case these disciples who have lost their cultivation really encounter fatal danger. After all, they still have a chance to rise again. In essence, they're still on the Taishu Temple's walls, and are still disciples of the Taishu Temple. It's just that this couple has no one to look after them now. This is also because they've accepted a task, in order to prevent us from noticing anything unusual. Yu Hongyan's eyes vaguely flickered with flames. As for his parents, we can already determine their origins. The question now is, how much does this spy himself know about his own life? Just based on the situation of this spy returning home to visit his relatives over the past few years, his parents probably haven't told us about their origins. Xiaoyan laughed coldly. The spy has been buried for too long, but he himself has never known about it. His sense of belonging to the Taishu Temple is getting stronger and stronger. Even now, can he still play the expected role? Zhu Yi said, from the looks of it, the Taishu Temple probably didn't intend to have direct contact with him in the first place. They're probably trying to secretly exert influence through his parents, subtly and slowly. They're even planning to keep this person in the dark as well, and unknowingly extract something valuable from the Taishu Temple. Of course, it's very difficult to do so, but with good planning, it's not like there's no chance, especially when the situation is chaotic, such as the war between the two worlds. Shi Tianhao said coldly, this pair of parents, they're tricking their own children. For their own path of advancement, they might destroy their children's future. Luo Qingwu's expression was not good either. That person is very filial. Zhu Yi said calmly, perhaps in the eyes of that pair of parents, they're doing it for the good of their children. In their hearts, the Taishu Temple is the world's orthodox, the best choice. What they're doing today is also paving the way for their children's future advancement. From a different perspective, from a different standpoint, one's conclusion will also be different. However, in the end, they're risking their children's future without their knowledge. Even if all parents are compassionate, this can't be whitewashed. Lin Feng clapped his hands lightly, and everyone immediately shut their mouths and looked at him. Little Yi, you've worked hard. Lin Feng was the first to speak. Zhu Yi bowed to him and said, Master, you're too kind. This is what I should do. Lin Feng looked at the others and smiled. The clues of the matter are now clear, but there's still the possibility that the other party has deliberately set up a trap, so we still need to verify more. However, when dealing with this matter, we still have to adhere to the principle that I'm the leader. Xiaoyan, Zhu Yi, and the others bowed together and said, this disciple will remember Master's teachings. Lin Feng nodded and said, you can go now. The disciples all nodded and said yes. Then Lin Feng waved his hand and left together. Zhu Yi's Haoyang doppelganger moved and communicated with his real body. At this moment, his real body was in a medium-class world. He was wearing a light purple robe with a white robe over it. He looked like a young scholar. Silently, he was sitting in a small tea stall, looking at the bustling market in front of him. This was a very ordinary small town. The people living here were all ordinary mortals. In order to make a living, the peddlers and servants were busy, running around in order to make a living. Zhu Yi sat in the tea stall, calmly watching all this. On the shabby square table beside him, there was a teapot and a teacup beside Zhu Yi's hand. In addition, there were 2 other teacups on the table. Chapter 1035. There were 2 other people sitting at the same table as Zhu Yi. One of them was a woman who wore a yellow robe. She had a noble bearing and a beautiful appearance. Although she didn't show it on the outside, she faintly emitted the bearing of a noble member of the royal family. The other person was a scholar around the age of 30. He wore a crimson-colored robe that was covered by a green robe, and he wore a silk scarf on his head. Every single move he made revealed an aura of being extremely knowledgeable and overflowing with talent. The scholar sat there. There was no aura around him, and there was no ripple of mana. However, There was a faint pillar of air above his head that shot up to the 9 heavens. The pillar of air was made up of many words, and they were written with beautiful writings. Zhu looked at the scholar and said, "Fellow Taoist Jiao, your literary aura is even thicker, and your knowledge has improved. Congratulations." The scholar in front of him was Jiao Junshen, who cultivated according to the ancient Confucian method. He had fought with Zhu Yi during the Desolate Sea Assembly. He had studied hard for many years and had always been an ordinary scholar. He did not have any qi cultivation. However, after he became the top scholar in the imperial examination of the Great Qin dynasty, his literary talent skyrocketed, and he reached the late stage of the golden elixir in a day. Scholars despise each other. His first meeting with Zhu Yi was not very pleasant. However, in the process of exchanging blows, they both benefited from each other. He also expressed his admiration for Zhu Yi's cultivation of Dao techniques and his literary talent. Through the fight with him, Zhu Yi comprehended other things by analogy and became extraordinary. He ignited the fire of his wisdom and literature and cleansed his soul. After the battle, the two became friends. After the Desolate Sea Assembly, Jiao Junshen returned to his hometown and settled down. He studied behind closed doors. He even quit being an official in the Great Qin dynasty and focused on learning. When Zhu Yi went out to travel, he would visit him in the Great Qin dynasty. The two became friends through literature and discussed Tao. Jiao Junshen could be considered one of the few close friends that Zhu Yi had outside of Xianmen Tianzong. Jiao Junshen's current cultivation level was at the early stage of Yuanying. Not long after the Desolate Sea Assembly, he broke through the bottleneck and broke through the void lightning tribulation, successfully forming his nascent soul. But from then on, this gentleman once again entered the stage of studying to nourish his qi. In terms of cultivation, his realm had always been stagnant. But in Zhu Yi's eyes, he could naturally see that as Jiao Junshen's knowledge grew day by day, his righteousness and cultural talent had become extremely abundant. If he continued on this path, he would definitely amaze the world with a single brilliant feat. When Jiao Junshen heard Zhu Yi's words, he smiled and said, "To be praised by Master Yi, I will have something to boast about in the future." He still looked the same as before. He wasn't handsome, masculine, or feminine. He just gave people a refreshing and amiable feeling. When Zhu Yi heard that, he also smiled slightly. "I wish fellow Taoist Jiao good luck in inheriting the foundation of the ancient Confucian sect and opening up a new future. You will definitely achieve essence soul in the future. It will definitely be a grand event in the literary world." Jiao Junshen said, "Previously I had a good foundation, but in the end, I was one step short and stagnated at the late stage of the golden elixir realm. I did not manage to form my nascent soul in one go. Later on, after fighting with Master Yi, I successfully broke through the bottleneck. This time, I will be more cautious. I was a little too impatient the previous time." Zhu Yi nodded. Since a scholar must be determined to forge ahead, he must be afraid of cultivation. This is the right path. Fellow Taoist Jiao's thinking is enough to show that the great Tao is not far away. As for the person who participated in the imperial examination with Master Yi and almost caused 100 sages to cry out, is there no more news about him after that? Jiao Junshen asked. Zhu Yi shook his head. There's no more news. However, I can basically confirm who he is. Jiao Junshen nodded and did not ask further. Zhu Yi raised his teacup and gave a toast to Jiao Junshen and the yellow-robed lady from afar. "No matter what, Princess Xingyun, fellow Taoist Jiao, thank you for your help." The yellow-robed lady was the Qin dynasty's princess, Shi Xingyun. She smiled faintly and raised her cup with Jiao Junshen at the same time. "Master Yi, you're being too polite." At this moment, Shi Xingyun's cultivation was at the late stage of the Yuanying realm. Her magical power and aura were all concealed, leaving no traces behind. However, her majestic appearance was increasing day by day. Zhu Yi knew her true foundation. He knew that as her cultivation improved, it would become more and more obvious. In fact, Zhu Yi was very interested. If Shi Xingyun continued to improve, would she achieve the human tribe's essence soul, or the demon tribe's indestructible demon soul? If it was only the essence soul incarnation realm, or the indestructible demon soul realm, it would be easier to deal with. Although they were different, They both pursued the path of becoming one with the world. The problem was, if she were to improve further, the human tribe's spirit refinement realm and the demon tribe's primordial true spirit realm would be completely different. The dragon's soul is gradually changing. The path she learned is also from the Great Qin dynasty's 5 emperor true dragons. There's a 90% chance that she has achieved the essence soul incarnation realm. Zhui thought to himself. Otherwise, all my previous efforts would have been in vain. Recently, Shi Xingyan had been traveling the heavens with him. They went to various medium-class worlds and alternate dimensions that belonged to the Great Qin dynasty. They followed the clues along the way and obtained a lot of useful information. In the end, they were able to sort out the background of the Taishu Temple's hidden chess piece. Zhu Yi was very grateful for this. Shi Xingyan looked at Zhu Yi and asked, Master Yi, is it possible for a person who cultivates the supreme Wang Qing Dao to recover from a broken Dao heart? I've never heard of it before. Although she was helping Zhu Yi to search for clues, Shi Xingyan had never asked why Zhu Yi was doing this, or whether it was related to the other people in Xianmen Tianzong. She did not even speculate too much in her heart. When they arrived, Zhu Yi went to search for clues on his own. She stood far away at the side and did not investigate further. She did not ask the locals or ask Zhu Yi what he had found. However, both she and the Great Qin dynasty were very interested in the situation of the Taishu Temple. They wanted to know more about it. The relationship between the Celestial Sect of Wonders and the Void Temple. Even though it could not be said to be at daggers drawn, it was definitely not harmonious. This was no longer a secret in the eyes of the higher-ups of the human clan forces in the vast land of the Divine Continent. Therefore, Shi Xingyun did not avoid the topic and asked directly. Zhu Yi glanced at Shi Xingyun and nodded. If the spiritual imprint of the Dao technique had not been erased and his foundation had not been completely destroyed, there would indeed be hope. However, the hope is still limited. After all, if one could really understand the concept of the Dao technique, his Dao heart would not have been broken. His expression was calm. He did not care about the discussion of the supreme Wang Qing Dao. It was as if his emotions did not fluctuate. Shi Xingyun and Jiao Junshan nodded after hearing this. They did not ask any further questions. Zhu Yi's words were enough for them. Shi Xingyun smiled faintly. She was the reincarnation of a dragon's soul. Although she had turned into a human, there were some things that she did not clearly state her views on. Therefore, no one would know what she was thinking. Under such circumstances, some things would be crossing the line if she spoke too much. Zhu Yi knew this very well. And so did Shi Xingyun. Therefore, she did not pursue the matter. Moreover, the answer that Zhu Yi had given her was enough for her to answer to the Great Qin dynasty. Jiao Junshan changed the topic. Apart from seeking knowledge, I've come to see Master Yi for another favor. Is it because of this child? Zhu Yi looked at the young girl standing behind Jiao Junshan. The young girl looked to be around 12 or 13 years old. Although she had not fully grown, she was undoubtedly a beauty. Her big, black eyes especially were particularly eye-catching. However, the young girl's gaze was rather sharp. One could tell at a glance that she was a person with ideas. Jiao Junshan said, Her name is Jiao Qing. She is a grandniece of my family. She has always wanted to cultivate since she was young. Although her mind is not stable, she has a strong will. Although Jiao Junshan was young, the Jiao family that he came from was also a large family that had been passed down for many years. The family had a large business and a large number of children. There was a huge age gap between people of the same generation. It was not unusual for people of different generations to be similar in age. Previously, she followed me to cultivate the way of Confucianism. Unfortunately, she was too wild and could not settle down to study. However, I can tell that she is a good candidate for cultivation. However, she is not compatible with my orthodoxy. Therefore, I brought her to see Master Yi. I hope that she can become a disciple of Xianmen Tianzong. Zhu Yi did not say anything. He looked at Jiao Junshan. He knew that Jiao Junshan had not finished speaking. If anyone wanted to become a disciple of a master, the Yinfeng Mirror Lake would always welcome ambitious people from all over the world. For some people, the long journey of thousands of miles was as difficult as ascending to heaven. However, for Jiao Qing, It was not difficult to reach the Yunfeng Mirror Lake. At the same time, according to Zhu Yi's understanding of Jiao Junqian, he was not a person who liked to seek personal gain. Sure enough, Jiao Junqian continued, anyone who wants to become a disciple of your sect has to start from the reflecting heart ladder at the foot of the Yunfeng. Qing, will not be an exception if she wants to be a disciple. I don't mean to ask you to be lenient to Qing. Everything will be done according to the rules. Today's visit is actually to fulfill a wish of Qing, and her parents. Therefore, I want to ask Master Yi to bless her with the Rising Dragon skill. Zhu Yi nodded. I want them to see what it will be like if they learn your Taoism and succeed in learning it. Jiao Junqian said, exactly. Behind him, Jiao Qing had a complicated expression on her face. She was a little excited, a little curious, a little sad, and a little regretful. Zhu Yi's Rising Dragon skill could raise the cultivation of cultivators below the nascent divinity realm by a small realm, up to the late Yuanying realm. Jiao Qing had been studying the ancient Confucian orthodoxy with Jiao Junqian, and had been studying to nourish her qi. At this moment, she did not have any cultivation. However, because the Rising Dragon skill and the ancient Confucian orthodoxy were very unique and mysterious, the combination of the two could allow Jiao Qing to show how high her initial achievements in cultivating the ancient Confucian orthodoxy were in a short period of time. Although there had been no results, Jiao Qing and her family still had some longing in their hearts for learning the Taoism from Jiao Junqian for many years. Regarding this, Zhu Yi naturally agreed. With a light flick of his finger, an azure dragon shadow wrapped around Jiao Qing's body. Jiao Qing's face showed an expectant expression, but as the azure dragon shadow disappeared, there was no change in her body. Jiao Junqian also shook his head. He would use his magic power to record the scene just now and bring it back to Jiao Qing's family later. The Taoism of the ancient Confucian orthodoxy was like this. Those who obtained the Taoism could ascend to the heavens in a single day, while those who failed to obtain the Taoism could only be an ordinary scholar after decades of hard work. Jiao Qing's expression was one of disappointment and relief. She did not suspect that Zhu Yi's magic art did not work as it should. Putting aside the fact that Zhu Yi's current status and cultivation level did not need to be like this, just based on his knowledge alone, Zhu Yi was already an existence that could suppress the world with his literature, surpassing Jiao Junqian. Zhu Yi looked at her and thought, her talent is really good. His Rising Dragon skill was supporting Jiao Qing's body, so he knew her situation like the back of his hand. Chapter 1036. Jiao Junqian looked at Jiao Qing and gently said, tenacity, perseverance, decisiveness, and a clear understanding of oneself are not in conflict. This is my last lesson for you. Jiao Qing's eyes regained their luster. She bowed to Jiao Junqian seriously. I understand what you mean, Grandpa 17. I'll be returning to the mountains soon. This child can come back with me. However, if she wants to become a disciple of the sect, she will have to go through all the necessary tests, Zhu Yi said. Jiao Junqian nodded. That's how it should be. Thank you. Zhu Yi stood up and cupped his fists towards Shi Xingyun and Jiao Junqian. Both of you, we shall part ways here. After putting Jiao Qing away with his powers, he disappeared. Shi Xingyun and Jiao Junqian bade each other farewell, and left the tea house. This dimensional realm belonged to the Great Qin dynasty. Shi Xingyun flew all the way out of the realm passage, and teleported back to West Hill City through the Void Formation. After entering the city, she first returned to the palace to greet Emperor Qin Stonefeather and her mother. After greeting Emperor Qin Stonefeather, Stonefeather said silently, if you have any difficulties improving your primordial spirit, feel free to look for me. I will guide you. Shi Xingyun replied respectfully, thank you, father. Stonefeather nodded. Your cultivation progress is indeed not slow. It's even faster than I expected. It's just that the barrier of the primordial spirit realm is more difficult than the sum of all the previous difficulties. You must not be impatient. Yes, father. I will follow your instructions. Following that, Shi Xingyun told Stonefeather about some information regarding the supreme Wangqing Dao that Zhu Yi had told him. Stonefeather naturally knew that she and Zhu Yi had traveled the heavens together. However, In order to show their respect for Xianmen Tianzong and Zhu Yi, the Qin dynasty was only limited to their friendship. They did not know the specifics. Knowing that it was related to the Taishu temple, Stonefeather's gaze froze for a moment before returning to normal. Shi Xingyun did not specifically investigate, so she only knew the progress of the matter. However, she did not know the cause and effect of the matter. However, just the information she reported was already sufficient to draw the attention of Stonefeather and the Qin dynasty. After Stonefeather heard this, he pondered for a moment. Slowly he said, "Go and rest. Your son will take his leave." Shi Xingyun exited the hall and returned to her residence. It was a palace that was not very large, but it was exquisite and luxurious. After freshening up, Shi Xingyun looked at her reflection in the mirror and muttered to herself, "The balance of the situation is becoming more and more fragile, and it is becoming more and more obvious that a storm is brewing. The earlier the war between the two worlds breaks out, the more advantageous it will be for me. The later it breaks out, the more dangerous it will be. There are thousands of great Daos in the world, and they all have their own mysteries. The ancient Confucian orthodoxy was already quite unique, and the Taishu Temple's supreme Wangqing Dao is also unique, and has its own universe within it." Just like Shi Xingyun, Zhu Yi was also pondering about the supreme Wangqing Dao at this moment. In a sense, this Dao art was somewhat related and entangled with him. "I don't have the real book of the supreme Wangqing Dao with me, but judging from the information I have, this Dao art gives me a strange feeling." While thinking, Zhu Yi's main body flew into the void and returned to the Kunlun mountain range in the divine land of the colossal world. After returning to the mountain, he went to the scripture tower, and went straight up to the third floor. There, Xiao Yan, Wang Lin, and Shi Tianhao, who had already received the news from him, were in a heated discussion. Xiao Yan and the others were not interested in cultivating the supreme Wangqing Dao, but they were also quite curious about the mysteries of this Dao art. At their current cultivation realm, their understanding of the great Daos of heaven and earth had become more and more profound, and they could feel the vastness of the great Daos of heaven and earth. Their motivation to improve was different and varied, but their curiosity and desire to learn about the mysteries of the great Daos of heaven and earth were the same. In fact, when one's cultivation realm reached a certain level, this was the same for all powerhouses. The only difference was how much they wanted to explore. First, one had to understand and see the truth. Only then could one be fearless and detached from the world. Therefore, apart from the supreme Wangqing Dao of the Taishu Temple, Xiao Yan and his brothers were also very curious about the Dao arts of various clans, especially the Dao art legacies that they could not understand at the moment. This was especially true for the Dao arts that were unique and different from the others. For example, the supreme Wangqing Dao, the ancient Confucian orthodoxy, the general outline of the primordial devil scripture, the supreme great Dao, the legendary primordial devil scripture, the primordial heart demon concealment curse, and so on. Of course, what fascinated Xiao Yan and the others the most was their own heavenly virtue scripture. Every time they cultivated it, they seemed to gain more benefits. At the same time that he cultivated the Dao scripture of heaven and Dao, he would be able to comprehend other Dao arts by analogy. Relying on the heavenly virtue scripture as a foundation, Xiao Yan and his brothers had actually dabbled in many Dao arts. As long as they were willing and spent a little time, they would definitely be stronger than the direct descendants who had cultivated the Dao art for many years. However, they already had the heavenly virtue scripture, so there was no need for Xiao Yan and the others to do that. When facing enemies, Xiao Yan and the others all had their own pride. However, they all had respect for the truth of the great Dao. Thus, they walked forward on this path of cultivation with their heads held high. The supreme Wangqing Dao contains the power of life and death. It's not the life and death of living beings, but the life and death of the truth of the great Dao. Xiao Yan said, "Once the Dao heart is broken, the cultivator's cultivation will completely disappear. The key is that if the foundation is damaged, it will not be able to switch to other Dao art classics. I'm afraid it's because it contains the power of destruction. If the Dao heart can be reconstructed, the cultivation can be quickly restored. It can even be restored overnight. It should be from the power of creation. But come to think of it, if the Tao heart is broken again, I'm afraid it will immediately fall to the bottom of the valley for the second time. Xiaoyan smacked his lips. It's just that the imbalance between life and death cannot be controlled by the cultivator himself. Instead, he has to strictly follow the guidance of the Tao art to maintain the balance. It has become the Tao controlling people instead of people cultivating Tao. This is actually a huge loophole and drawback. Strictly speaking, this is actually a Tao art that has serious flaws and is not yet perfect. If Xiaoyan's words were to spread outside, it would immediately cause an uproar. The entire divine land would be shaken, and there might even be a riot at White Cloud Mountain. Nowadays, the world has more and more recognized the power of the Xianmen Tianzong Tao art. However, the Tao of Taishu has to be famous throughout the ages. It has always been regarded as the Tao treasure that is closest to the heavenly Tao. The Taishang Wangqing Tao, together with the Tao of Yin and Yang of the Void, is known as the Taishang and Void. It is the core of the Tao of Taishu, the supreme Tao. It is better than the Taishang Dragon Transformation Scripture, the Pure Yin Collection, the Pure Yang Heart Technique, and the Thoughts of Wandering into Taishu Temple. This treasured scripture, which has been admired by thousands of people in the Divine Land for many years, was said by Xiaoyan to have serious flaws, and was not yet perfect. If the cultivators of Taishu Temple knew about it, they would most likely fight him to the death. However, although Xiaoyan's tone was relaxed, there was no sense of contempt in his expression. It was obvious that he was not joking, but analyzing seriously. In front of him, Wang Lin and Shi Tianhao looked calm, and did not show any signs of shock or surprise. Slowly, Wang Lin said, "The core of the Taishang Wangqing Tao lies in the Taishang Wangqing Tao. The human becomes the sky, just like the ancient heavenly Tao overlooking the myriad of emotions in the human world. The thousands of emotions in the world can enter the heart, but they can also be withdrawn at any time. The Tao becomes empty, and the 5 colors are not confused. The heart of Tao is clear, and there is nothing on the beer, not even a speck of dust. Therefore, it clearly reflects the Tao of heaven and earth. When the cultivator practices the Tao, the realm will improve by leaps and bounds. Of course, this is the most ideal state. The teachings of the Taishang Wangqing Tao require the cultivator to pursue this ideal state. It is impossible for the cultivator to maintain this state all the time. Therefore, once the threads of emotion entangle the cultivator, causing the cultivator to deviate from the ideal state, it is equivalent to sliding from the 9 heavens to the abyss. Shi Tianhao shook his head and said, "However, the practice of this Tao, there is no human world between Jade Fall and the Yellow Springs. If you don't go up Jade Fall, you will go down to the Yellow Springs. Although the path of the Great Tao is not smooth and there are dangers everywhere, there is definitely a problem in such a situation." Xiaoyan was originally leaning against the pillar of the pavilion. At this moment, he straightened up and walked to the edge of the 3rd floor of the depository of scriptures. He looked into the void and said, "There are many Tao techniques that are more dangerous than the Taishang Wangqing Tao. There are also many Tao techniques in the demonic path that are either successful or dead. However, these Tao techniques pursue opportunities brought by danger. Without danger, there will be no opportunities. From the beginning, it is obvious that they are aiming for the yellow springs of the underworld, killing their way out of it. The Taishang Wangqing Tao is a path to the heavens. It is a pity that as you walk, the steps will break at any time. If you step on empty air, you will go down to hell." Xiaoyan turned around and looked at his 3 junior brothers. "Then the problem is what we can see, no one in Taishu Temple has seen for so many years. Is it that there is no need to improve? Or is it impossible to improve?" Zhui walked to Xiaoyan's side and looked into the distance. "I'm afraid the key lies in the other formula of the Taishang and Void incantations, the Void Yin Yang Tao." Xiaoyan nodded. Yin and Yang are infinite, creation is balanced. The Void is endless and mysterious. The Void Yin Yang Tao can balance the flaws of the disharmony of life and death in the Taishang Wangqing Tao. However, the Taishu Temple cultivators that we have come into contact with have only cultivated one type of Tao technique. There might be something special about it. We have never really come into contact with the Taishang and Void incantations, so we can't make a judgment based on analysis alone. Shi Tianhao and Wang Lin looked at each other and said in a deep voice, I'm afraid that one can not only cultivate one type of Dao technique. To be precise, it should be that before a certain realm, one can only cultivate one type of Dao technique. Zhu Yi said in a deep voice, from the looks of it, it is very likely to be the realm of fusing. Oh. Xiao Yan understood immediately. What did you guys discover when you were fighting with Xianlin Taoist and Kai Fengvo? Regardless of whether it was the original body or the clone, among the four of them, he was the only one who had not fought with Taishu Temple's fusing experts. On a branch of the mysterious sky treasure tree, Lin Feng sat cross-legged. His gaze swept across the scripture repository and he smiled. Not bad, your reactions are not slow. Chapter 1037. In Xianmen Tianzong, the first person to come into contact with the Taishu Temple's Dao integration experts was naturally Lin Feng. 10 years ago in the War of West Hill City, Lin Feng had fought with the Taishu Temple's Grand Supreme Elder Kuang Heng and the Xianlin Taoist. He had also exchanged blows with the Taishu Temple's previous venerable elder, Shoichi Dashin. Since then, Lin Feng had some conjectures about the Taishu Temple's Dao techniques. However, he had not really seen the great Dao of Taishu, so many things could only be speculated on paper. With the establishment of the third chapter of Lin Feng's Heavenly Dao Virtue Scripture, Lin Feng had refined his spirit to return to the void. He had relied on the Heavenly Dao Scripture to deduce and figure out the great Dao of Taishu. He had made new progress, confirmed his previous conjectures, and his train of thought became clearer. The Xianlin Taoist had obtained the Dao through the Supreme Wang Qing Dao. After returning to the void and fusing with the Dao, his Dao fruit was the Supreme Nirvana. However, during the War of West Hill City, Lin Feng could vaguely feel that he had the foundation of the void Yin-Yang Dao. However, it was not as deep as the Supreme Wang Qing Dao. Although he did not reveal the relevant Dharma power and supernormal powers, Lin Feng could still see some clues. On Kuang Heng, this characteristic was even more obvious. Although Kuang Heng had only used the Supreme Wang Qing Dao's supernormal Dharma power to fight with Lin Feng, his cultivation level in the void Yin-Yang Dao was stronger than the Xianlin Taoists. However, it was not as deep as his Supreme Wang Qing Dao. Since he had used the void Yin-Yang Dao to fight with Lin Feng, it was naturally better to continue using the Supreme Wang Qing Dao's supernormal Dharma power. However, this did not mean that Kuang Heng's void Yin-Yang Dao was useless. In his body, the Supreme and Void were the main and supplementary skills. They complemented each other. Although the supplementary Void Yin-Yang Dao was not obvious, it played a role in an invisible place. It nourished the Supreme Wang Qing Dao and complemented it. When it came to Shoichi Dashin, it was even more obvious. In the Battle of West Hill City, Lin Feng only exchanged one move, so he could only see a limited number of things. But the recent fight in the desolate ancient Star Sea made Lin Feng completely sure that Shoichi Dashin had definitely practiced the Tai and Su skills to a very profound level. According to the legends, Shoichi Dashin had also attained the Dao through the supreme Dao of Wang Qing in the past. He attained the primordial spirit, refined his spirit to return to the void, and finally returned to the void and merged with the Dao. However, Lin Feng was almost certain that Shoichi Dashin had also used the void Yin-Yang Dao to refine a Dao fruit in addition to returning to the void with the supreme Wang Qing Dao to refine a Dao fruit. The current Shoichi Dashin was created on the basis of possessing two completely different yet faintly compatible fruits of the Dao. The eminent monks of the Great Lane Monastery, who were at the third level of the Golden Body Buddhist monasteries, would only attempt to go through the tribulation after they had comprehended all 5 Rulai Sutras. However, the Pure Land of Buddhism manifested by the almighty experts of the Golden Body realm only needed one type. The other 4 Rulai Sutras served as a supplement. However, the effects of this couldn't be ignored. Without one Rulai Sutra, there would be a lot more risk in going through the tribulation. Therefore, ever since the war between the two worlds caused the Mahavarokana scripture to be completely lost, the Great Tempest Monastery had never produced another cultivator who could successfully transcend the tribulation. As for the Taishu Temple's Taoist arts, Lin Feng suspected that the requirements were even harsher. One had to use the Tai and Void incantations to synthesize 2 kinds of Taoist fruits at the Dao fusing realm. Only when the two Taoists were combined would one begin to progress toward the first tribulations. Perhaps he needed to fuse the two paths into one, and only then would he be able to completely overcome the initial tribulation and attain the last day's realm. Not only can the void Yin-Yang Tao make up for the flaws of the Supreme Wang-Qing Tao, the Supreme Wang-Qing Tao is also an important supplement to the void Yin-Yang Tao. Lin Feng thought to himself, although it doesn't have as many ups and downs as the Supreme Wang-Qing Tao, the void Yin-Yang Tao also has some problems. It can't be said to be flawless. Up until now, Lin Feng still has not truly read the two arts of Tai and Void, but his heavenly virtue scripture surpasses even the mysteries of the great Tao of Taishu. It is all-encompassing, profound and profound. The scripture tower also has all kinds of wondrous uses. Under continuous deduction he cannot obtain the true scripture, but he can deduce a thing or two. His current gains and discoveries, compared to Xiao Yan, will make the middle and lower level cultivators of the Void Temple, who do not understand the situation, go crazy. This was because the conclusion that Lin Feng came to was even crazier than Xiao Yan's. Not only did the Supreme Wang-Qing Tao have serious flaws, but the Void Yin-Yang Tao also had them. The Supreme Tai and Void incantations of the Great Tao of Taishu both had this or that problem that needed to be solved. If this news was released, there would really be an earthquake in the Divine Land. Even Tianhuang continent would tremble from the aftershocks. However, if the low-level cultivators didn't understand the situation, the upper echelons of the Taishu Temple would definitely notice. As their cultivation level increased, their understanding of the great Tao of heaven and earth deepened, and their understanding of their own Dharmic Tao became more detailed. Naturally, they would realize the truth of the matter. The top experts of the Taishu Temple have probably noticed this problem and tried their best to solve it. Lin Feng thought to himself, after so many years of refinement, and with so many talents in the Taishu Temple, there should be some gains. Now it seems that their idea is to merge the two Taoists into one. Not only will it solve the current problem, but it will also improve it. However, this idea was difficult to realize. Until now, the threshold of merging the two Taoists into one was stuck at the Tao reunion realm. To push it down further, the successors of the Taishu Temple would need to continue researching. Lin Feng could only sense the existence of one Dharmic Tao from the Void Reversion Taishu Temple cultivator, Tao Lord Yun Zun. However, the Taishu Taoist is an outstanding talent. Lin Feng smiled. Even if there are flaws, the Tai and Void incantations will go down in history and become the top Dharmic Tao legacies in this world. It's a pity that the Taishu Taoist went to the Death Sea when Qiang is homeless, and the Tai Tao Lord was injured by the Yuhuang Heaven Sea. Otherwise, the situation might be different. If they don't merge and complement each other, but improve on their own, the perfect Tai and Void incantations will be even more powerful and exciting. The more powerful and profound a Dharmic Tao was, the more difficult it would be to make up for it if there were no flaws. Lin Feng stood up from the arcane heaven treasure tree. With a step, he came to the top floor of the scripture depository. Xiao Yan, Zhu Yi, Wang Lin, and Shi Tianhao saw him and quickly bowed to greet him. Lin Feng waved his hand and said, "No need for formalities." He came to a bamboo chair at the center of the top floor and sat down. Looking at Xiao Yan and the others, he said with a smile, "You guys are having a lively discussion." Xiao Yan and the others looked at each other and smiled. Shi Tianhao said, "Master, we were talking about the Dharmic Tao and divine arts of the Taishu Temple cultivators Xianlin Taoist and Kai Fengzhou. This time in the desolate ancient sea of stars, although his yin-yang cycle Tao fruit came from the void yin-yang Tao, and when he fought with me and second senior brothers Hao Yang clone, his Dharmic Tao and magic power also came from the void yin-yang Tao, but," Shi Tianhao raised his eyebrows and said, "But disciple felt that I could vaguely see the shadow of the Supreme Wang-Qing Tao in him. There is no basis for this, it's just a feeling. He didn't display the Dharmic Tao's divine arts at all, but disciple can't get rid of this feeling." Zhu Yi said, "If it was only little junior brother who had this feeling, it might be his illusion. But disciple and he both had the same feeling, so it shouldn't be an illusion. I also had the same feeling from Xianlin Taoist, but it was the other way around. In the Supreme Wang-Qing Tao, I could vaguely see the shadow of the void yin-yang Tao. Wang Lin said. The three of them had the same feeling, so it shouldn't be an illusion or a coincidence. He paused for a moment and said, if the other party deliberately misled us, and we couldn't see any flaws, it could only mean that there is a huge gap between us. But, saying that, Wang Lin shook his head. He would not be arrogant, but he would not belittle himself either. If it was said that there was a huge gap between him and Shoichi Daishin, he would admit it. But when it came to Xianlin Taoist, victory or defeat aside, at least they were opponents of the same level, or in other words, opponents of similar levels, although Xianlin Taoist was in the Tao integration realm, and he had not returned to the void. Lin Feng looked at the group of disciples, but did not explain much. Instead, he smiled and pointed at them. Since you are so interested, then in the time of cultivation, all of you should think about this problem carefully. This is not considered to be slacking off. Although the supreme and void techniques of the Taishu Temple have flaws, they are quite extraordinary and outstanding in terms of concept. If you study them carefully, you will be able to achieve the effect of learning from others, and it will be beneficial for your cultivation of the Tao techniques of our sect. Lin Feng smiled and said, at your current cultivation realm, you have gradually passed the stage of specialization. You can continue to expand your knowledge and understanding of the Tao techniques horizontally, which will help you improve vertically on the foundation Tao techniques of our sect. It is not only the Tao techniques of the Taishu Temple, it is the same for other techniques. If you can make up for the flaws in them, or improve them, in the process, you will gain a lot. Xiaoyan opened his mouth. Master, there are many Tao techniques that we don't have on hand. For example, the supreme and void techniques, we are actually just armchair strategists. Lin Feng shook his head. With the foundation Tao techniques of our sect, as long as we have some clues, we will gain a lot. Although it is not the real thing, it is not armchair strategists either. There is no need to deliberately plunder other people's Tao techniques. I don't ask you to cultivate those Tao techniques, and you don't need to care about the supernatural powers and techniques. What is important is what you gain in the process of understanding and analyzing them. Xiaoyan, Zhu Yi, Wang Lin and Shi Tianhao nodded together and said, we understand, we will not neglect the essentials to pursue trifles. Lin Feng looked at them and suddenly laughed in his heart. Why does it feel like a research group in a research institute? But this research group led by me, I am afraid it is not very likable. For a moment, the evil interest hidden in Lin Feng's heart was on the verge of exploding. Oh, what is it called? Xianmen Tao Technique Research Group? He smiled and shook his head. His figure disappeared from the hidden scripture tower and returned to the mysterious sky treasure tree. The gate of Star Sea in front of him opened. Facing the starlight, he continued his cultivation. At the top floor of the scripture depository, Xiaoyan and his fellow apprentices respectfully sent Lin Feng off together. Then Xiaoyan turned his head and looked at the other three saying, while we're taking care of our own cultivation, we can't delay the teaching of our disciples. Fortunately, the second-generation direct disciples are basically on the right track, and they are gradually beginning to be able to take charge of things on their own. We can hand over the third-generation direct disciples to them without worry, but we also need to give them frequent reminders. Shi Tianhao smiled and said, second senior brother and third senior brother both have clones. This problem is mainly for eldest senior brother and me. Xiaoyan also smiled and said, you are right. Zhu Yi and Wang Lin also smiled slightly, and with a thought from Wang Lin, the great demon clone that had transformed into the size of a normal person woke up from the meditative state, stood up and pushed the door open. Chapter 1038. Wang Lin's demon avatar walked out of his room. He walked with his hands behind his back and strolled in the mountains. His mortal forest residence was built in a simple courtyard on a hill formed from the Jade Capital Mountain. When Wang Lin left the courtyard, he didn't break through space to escape. Instead, he walked around the mountain like a normal person. The originally vicious demon avatar's aura was slowly retracting. It looked very similar to Wang Lin's original body. Wang Lin walked all the way to the top of the mountain. He saw an array at the top of the mountain that was flashing with white light. In the center of the array, a beautiful and quiet girl in purple was sitting cross-legged with her eyes closed. It was Wang Lin's direct disciple Li Xingfei. Wang Lin came in front of her. After sizing her up, he said, "The 1-year deadline is approaching. Are you ready?" Li Xingfei opened her eyes and looked at Wang Lin. She didn't get up to bow. It wasn't that she didn't want to, it was that her entire body had merged with the array. If she moved, all her previous efforts would be wasted. "Disciple is ready," Li Xingfei said solemnly. Then, she closed her eyes again. Wang Lin flicked his finger. The flashing array suddenly sped up. The white light slowly turned into black gas that surrounded Li Xingfei. Other than Wang Lin and Li Xingfei herself, no one knew what Li Xingfei was going to face. Within the black gas, only Wang Lin's voice could be heard. "You were able to successfully form your core and see through life and death. This means you don't lack courage. You failed at the last stage a few times. I hope you can pass this time." There was no sound from the array. There was only endless black gas that kept moving. After a short while, circles of black light continued to spread in all directions. However, Wang Lin's great devil avatar clenched his hand and covered the black light, preventing it from continuing to spread. His eyes were as calm as water. He looked at the black gas in front of him emotionlessly. A few projections landed beside him. It was Xiao Yan and the others. Looking at the array, Xiao Yan asked, "How many times has it been?" Wang Lin answered, "Including the time before I entered the void battlefield, this is the 6th time. The last 3 times, once a year in the Big Thousand World." Zhu Yi slowly said, "Her personality is calm and steady. She is reasonable and her will is strong enough. She can also calm her temper and calm her heart. She is gentle on the outside but strong on the inside. Although she is a woman, her ambition is not inferior to a man. Her achievements should be more than that. At the very least, she is not inferior to Aloza and Su Yinsheng. The only problem that restrains her is that she lacks a sense of drive. She has the heart to improve, and is good at thinking and choosing a relatively advantageous path. However, she is too rational, which more or less restrains her." Xiaoyan nodded. On the path of cultivation, it is not advisable to advance recklessly. However, it does not mean that everything will go smoothly just by seeking stability. Although it is important to take one step at a time, there are some barriers that require great determination, perseverance, and wisdom, as well as great courage. He looked at the black gas rolling in front of him and said, "This is not only suitable for daily cultivation. It is also the same when dealing with external enemies." In the past, she was ambushed by Yang Likuan, the scum of the reincarnation sect. Although she responded appropriately, she was still heavily injured in the end. The dangerous environment was one thing, but her decision was a moment too slow. A short period of hesitation was also an important reason. Many times, there is only a thin line between life and death. The reason why third junior brother arranged this trial for her is because she has encountered similar situations when she went out, so she had to pay attention to it. Shi Tianhao turned to look at Wang Lin. "Third senior brother, as long as she can pass this trial, make up for her shortcomings and improve herself, you will make her the chief disciple?" Wang Lin replied calmly, "That's right." Shi Tianhao grinned. "Your position as the chief disciple has been vacant for so many years. It is better to have nothing than to be inferior." Wang Lin replied indifferently, "Tian Quan meets the requirements, but the situation is special. Without considering her, the most outstanding disciple of the 2nd generation is Tian Qi, but she can still do better." Xiaoyan put his hands behind his head and asked in a relaxed tone, "About her parents, should we tell her herself? It will only add to her worries. With her personality, it is most likely the result of being stuck between two sides. No matter how calm and composed a person is, they still have feelings. She is a very filial person, and this trial will not be easy to pass. It will be much more difficult than the current trial. I don't think it is necessary to let our disciple go through emotional torment. As long as we can confirm that she does not know, then she is a disciple of Xianmen Tianzong. She has always performed well, has deep feelings for the sect, and has made many contributions. Such a disciple should be protected by the sect." Zhu Yi said, "This matter involves her parents' close relatives, and her parents were not deceived. Since that is the case, she will have to face it eventually. It is better to let her make the decision herself. Xiaoyan thought about it and said, "That is true." He turned to look at Wang Lin. "Third junior brother, what do you think?" Wang Lin's tone was very calm as he said indifferently, "I believe she can handle it well. I am not wrong about her." "It is too late even if you are wrong. Although you can only practice the 8 trigram scripture of the Great Way when you are about to form your gold core, it is still our sect's direct disciple." Xiaoyan was obviously joking. "If you turn around and sell our sect to Taishu Temple, we will not be able to do anything about it." When Zhu Yi and Wang Lin heard this, they both smiled. If they really were wrong about her, it would not be too late. Xianmen Tianzong had developed to this day, and everything was getting better day by day. Not only did they improve their hardware facilities and accumulated resources, but they also improved a lot invisibly. They seemed inconspicuous, but these invisibly accumulated resources were the real foundation, and they were also the cornerstone for a sect to develop for a long time. Zhu Yi muttered to himself for a moment before saying, "Maybe Marshal Nephew Tianqi does not need to be put in a difficult position." When they heard this, Xiaoyan, Wang Lin, and Shi Tianhao all looked at him. "You mean?" Zhu Yi's words were without rhyme or reason, but the other 3 clearly understood what he meant. Xiaoyan said, "It's just that we cannot be sure of the time. We might have to wait for a long time." Silently, Wang Lin said, "It might not take too long." "That's right." When Xiaoyan heard this, he smiled. Zhu Yi and Shi Tianhao also smiled. "Then let's wait for a while." Shi Tianhao glanced at the formation. "It's almost over." The black fog that lingered above the formation gradually reached its peak. This black fog did not seem very frightening, nor did it make people feel lifeless. It was not pure darkness, nor was it as frightening as the Azura Hell. There were no chilly winds, no ghosts and no demons. It was soundless, as if it was just pure black fog, but it gave people a bad feeling from the bottom of their hearts. Wang Lin calmly looked at the black fog in front of him. The moment the black fog reached its peak, he nodded and said indifferently, "Success." As soon as he said this, the extremely flourishing black fog in front of him suddenly began to recede rapidly, and a gentle white light lit up from within. The white light became brighter and brighter, and in the end, it completely spread out, enveloping the entire mountain peak. In the center of the light, Li Xingfei sat cross-legged, her hands forming a seal. There was no aura of transcendence energy around her, but it gave people the feeling that she had been reborn. Li Xingfei opened her eyes, and when she saw Wang Lin in front of her, her face revealed a slightly excited expression. She had failed the trial many times, and now she had finally succeeded. Even the usually calm and composed Li Xingfei felt excited. However, Li Xingfei quickly calmed down. She first bowed to Wang Lin, then to Xiaoyan, Zhu Yi and Shi Tianhao. Xiaoyan and the other 2 nodded their heads, and the projection of light disappeared, leaving only Wang Lin's great demon avatar in his original position. He looked at Li Xingfei and said, "You did well." Li Xingfei had studied under Wang Lin for many years, and was already used to her master's style. No matter how surprising something was, he still had that calm and indifferent look on his face. However, Li Xingfei knew that Wang Lin praised her for finally passing the trial. After she became Wang Lin's disciple, she only received the word, "not bad," 3 times. Wang Lin said, "There are 2 things I want to tell you. First, from today onwards, you are the head disciple of Fan Lin House's 2nd generation direct disciples." Hearing this, Li Xingfei's spirit rose. Currently, the successor disciples of the 8 lineages of the Celestial Sect 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 of the Celestial Sect. Out of the 8 caves, the only exception was Wang Lin's Fan Lin House, which had never confirmed a head disciple. Among the disciples of Fan Lin House, there were some outstanding people. Dao Yuding and Li Xingfei were known as the twin geniuses back then, and they were also famous people. As time passed, everyone gradually understood that Dao Yuding had no interest in the head-disciple position. She concentrated on her own cultivation and didn't like to interact with others. Therefore, everyone guessed that the head-disciple position of Fanlin House was 90% likely to belong to Li Xingfei. Li Xingfei was originally the earliest direct disciple of Fanlin House, and her performance had always been outstanding. Although she was inferior to Tang Jun, Zhou Yunsong, Han Yang, Yang Tai and Huang Jinting, she was still quite outstanding. However, the final result was surprising. Wang Lin would rather remain in the air than confirm Li Xingfei as the head disciple of Fanlin House's second-generation direct disciples. Xianmen Tianzong's house was still considered stable, but those who received the news in the outside world started to make guesses. They thought that Li Xingfei had caused Wang Lin's dissatisfaction. In a short period of time, all kinds of rumors started to spread. Some were against Li Xingfei, and some were against Wang Lin. Although they were afraid of Xianmen Tianzong and Wang Lin's power, so the rumors only spread behind their backs, but some of them were still very popular. Li Xingfei was very clear that as long as she passed the trial and test that Wang Lin gave her, the head disciple position was very likely to be hers. Of course, her time and opportunities weren't unlimited. With regards to her own master, Li Xingfei understood quite a bit. Naturally, she knew that it was impossible for her to specially set up a trial that she was destined to be unable to pass just to brush her off. Li Xingfei knew clearly that the reason for her previous failures was because of herself. Therefore, she had been training hard to overcome her problems. Now that she had finally succeeded, it was time for her to usher in the good times. Chapter 1039. Li Xingfei understood that the assessment that Wang Lin had set for herself was not simple. In addition to addressing the problems that had always been there, it had also become another test. Under the criticism and questioning eyes of outsiders, it was difficult to always maintain a calm and stable state of mind, and unswervingly work hard and move forward towards the set goal. If she was not confirmed as the chief disciple, it would also form a psychological pressure, which in turn would affect the trial that Wang Lin had prepared for her. Especially in the case that she had failed many trials, the psychological pressure would become greater and greater. As for how to overcome it, it all depended on Li Xingfei herself. However, all her efforts had not been in vain. She had ushered in the day when her bitterness was over, and the sweetness had come. Keep these things. Wang Lin pointed with his finger, and a few streams of light landed in front of Li Xingfei. Li Xingfei fixed her eyes on it and saw that 4 things were silently floating in the air, all emitting a powerful wave of power, especially 3 of them, all of which were Yuanying period instruments. The last one was a golden elixir period instrument, but it was a magic sword. It was less than a foot long, and it was not as sharp as a sword. Instead, it exuded a spiritual aura, and its whole body was glowing with red light. Zhuluan's sacrificial sword. Seeing this short sword, Li Xingfei felt a lot of emotions. This sword was the inherited instrument of Fanlin Ju. It was not a sacrificial refinement of the sword Dao. Its effect was to help the cultivator cast spells faster, and enhance the power of the cultivator's own spells. It was an auxiliary instrument of the golden elixir period, and it did not have any attack power. As a golden elixir period instrument, it did not have any attack power. It was purely an auxiliary effect, so its auxiliary effect could naturally be imagined, and was very impressive. Under normal circumstances, this instrument would be inherited by the chief disciple of Fanlin Ju. If the disciple was confirmed as the chief disciple when he was in the foundation establishment period, then he could get this golden elixir period instrument when he was in the foundation establishment period. It was passed down from generation to generation. Whenever a new chief disciple was established, it would be passed down by the chief disciple of the previous generation. This had become the overall tradition of Xianmen Tianzong, not only in Fanlin Ju, but also in other cave residences. Moreover, Xiaoyan Wang Lin and others coincidentally refined the instrument given by Lin Feng when their cultivation was still low, and used it as an inherited instrument. When Wang Lin was in the foundation establishment and gold core stages, the 2 magic tools that Lin Feng had given him, the 2 pole magnetic rings and the cloud elephant seal, had been completely destroyed the first time he entered the void battlefield. Therefore, Wang Lin went to Lin Feng to ask for 2 magic treasures, one for the nascent soul stage and one for the golden core stage. At that time, it of Yuanying and Lin Li Xingfei, Xiao Tianzong Lin, Luan Lin period, and the elixir period would be. Lin Wang Feng Tata said. Li Stu Luan said. Li Lin said Li said. Among them, the golden elixir period instrument was this Zhu Luan sacrificial sword. For the current Li Xingfei, it was still suitable. However, compared to Huang Jinting, who obtained the Tiger Soul Golden Disc when he was in the late stage of the Foundation Establishment realm, Tang Jun, who obtained the Black Cloud Flag when he was in the middle stage of the Foundation Establishment realm, and the head disciples of other caves, Li Xingfei obtained this Zhu Luan sacrificial sword much later. However, Li Xingfei already knew all of this in her heart. It's not too late to obtain it now. I will make good use of these things, and in the future, pass them on to the 3rd generation head disciple of my Fanlin residence. She looked at the other side. It was a pale white spirit stone the size of a fist. The surface of the spirit stone was wrapped with black ropes that crisscrossed with each other. Li Xingfei looked carefully and saw many blood-red incantations floating on the surface of the black ropes. This is the time-binding curse forbidden stone, right? Li Xingfei guessed. Although she hadn't seen it with her own eyes, she had heard Master Wang Lin mention it before. The time-binding curse forbidden stone was a Yuanying period instrument that Wang Lin had asked Lin Feng to bestow upon her. When Lin Feng bestowed the instrument to his personal disciples, he had thought about it carefully. He wanted to fit the disciples' actual situation as much as possible in order to achieve the best result. Now that the time-binding curse forbidden stone was bestowed, it was naturally not for Wang Lin to use. Therefore, he had to consider the characteristics of Wang Lin's disciples, or what kind of disciples Wang Lin would teach. Although Lin Feng didn't teach the younger disciples personally, he had a general understanding of their situation. The direct disciples of Wang Lin's mortal forest house were all of the same lineage as Wang Lin himself. They were all pure Dharma cultivators. Even if there were disciples who cultivated Dharma cultivations, they were only there to support them. Unlike Xiao Yan, Shi Tianhao, and Yu Hongyan, there were many disciples who were proficient in martial Dao sacred arts. Under such circumstances, what situation did the disciples of Mortal Forest House not like to encounter the most? Similar to the Jade Dragon race and the Peacock race, opponents who had Dharma break or forbidden spell sacred arts, or ancient heavenly gate secret technique, reverse curse restriction. Lu Yuan's myriad phenomenon mirror, Shadow Demon Dao's shadow ancient mirror, and other sacred arts were the same. Because of this, the Yuanying period instrument that Lin Feng bestowed upon Wang Lin as an inheritance instrument was this time-binding curse forbidden stone. This stone could restrain other people's Dharma spells and sacred arts and break them. If the opponent's Dharma spell was targeted, the time-binding curse forbidden stone could reverse it and help the user turn defeat into victory. Of course, although the effect of the time-binding curse forbidden stone was sharp, there was an upper limit to its ability. How to use it effectively depended on the cultivator's own adaptability. Wang Lin looked at Li Xingfei. With a thought, the time-binding curse forbidden stone and Zhu Luan sacrificial sword floated into Li Xingfei's hands. Look at you already know them? That's right, this is the inheritance instrument of my mortal forest house. You're the head of the 2nd generation direct disciples, so I'll give it to you now. When the head of the 3rd generation direct disciples is confirmed, you can pass it on. Foundation establishment period can get the Zhu Luan sacrificial sword. Golden elixir period can get the time-binding curse forbidden stone. Li Xingfei quickly took it and nodded. Wang Lin's fingers tapped lightly, and the other 2 Yuanying period instruments fell into Li Xingfei's hands. These 2 instruments are treasures specially given to you as the head disciple of my sect. They can enhance your strength and make it convenient for you to travel outside. Li Xingfei looked at the 2 instruments. These were completely her personal treasures. In the future, when there was a 3rd generation head disciple, she didn't need to pass it on. The sect would have a new supply. Of course, if she had already formed her nascent soul at that time, she might have to participate in the work of refining the instruments. If she wanted to bestow her own head disciple's instrument to the next head disciple, she could, but it was all voluntary. The two Yuanying period instruments that appeared in Li Xingfei's hands were a dark yellow robe and a pair of rings. These two instruments were personally refined by Wang Lin. The dark yellow robe was called the Underworld Dharma robe. It could receive the underworld true water and produce the effect of both offense and defense. At the most critical moment, this Dharma robe could allow the wearer to transform into Wang Lin's underworld undying body for a short period of time. Thus, it had an extremely powerful protective effect. At the critical moment of a battle, it was a trump card to turn the tables. However, after one transformation, it would take a long time to recover. As for the pair of rings, they were only the size of a palm. One was black and the other was white. The black ring was engraved with the demons of the underworld, while the white ring was engraved with the myriad of phenomena of the heavens. When the two rings were combined, it could stimulate the true meaning of the two extremes of life and death. The black ring represented death, and could be used to injure the enemy. It was extremely incisive. If the opponent couldn't defend in time, once the death aura touched their body, they would immediately be in a dangerous situation. The white ring represented life, and could be used to help with cultivation. If a cultivator was injured, it could help with treatment. This pair of black and white rings was called the two forgetting rings of life and death. It was also personally refined by Wang Lin. Li Xingfei kept the four instruments and thanked Wang Lin. Her current cultivation level was at the later stage of the golden elixir, so her battle strength was also extraordinary. With these treasures, she was like a tiger that had grown wings. Wang Lin shook his head. This is the result of your own hard work. You have a steady and calm temperament, so I won't say much about not being arrogant and impetuous. However, you must remember the trial you passed today. Use this as a warning. In the future, don't relapse and always reflect on yourself. Li Xingfei quickly answered. Disciple will remember master's teachings. I will definitely remember today's harvest. Wang Lin said. All right, let's talk about the second matter now. Li Xingfei nodded. Please tell me, master. Next, I will be studying Taoist techniques with your martial uncles. If you come and listen, it will be another round of training for you. After Wang Lin finished, Li Xingfei was both happy and frightened. Master, the level of your conversation with martial uncles is too high. I'm afraid I can't understand it. She was naturally happy. With the current cultivation level and knowledge of Xiao Yan, Wang Lin, and the others, a few words from them would be of great help to her. Although it was called training, it was actually a great benefit. Of course, the prerequisite was that she must be able to understand. Since Wang Lin said that he would be listening, it meant that she could not interrupt and ask questions. Wang Lin would also not explain specifically. How much she could understand would depend on herself. Wang Lin said lightly, It's not the Taoist techniques of our sect, but the Taoist techniques of other sections. We will study and deduce them. Li Xingfei asked curiously, Is it the Buddhist scriptures in the scripture depository and the Taoist techniques of Heaven Gate, Underworld Hall, Reincarnation Sect, etc.? We will learn about all of them. Other than that, we can also deduce the Taoist techniques that are not recorded in the sect. Wang Lin said, for example, the Taishu Temple's Supreme Wang Qing Dao, the Primordial Heart Demon Dispel Incantation of Primordial Demon Cult, etc. Li Xingfei nodded. I will work hard. Wang Lin brought her down the mountain and returned to Fan Lin Residence's courtyard. As they walked, he said, Other than you, there will be other second-generation disciples listening in as well. After listening in, you can also use your own sect's Dao techniques as a foundation to figure out the Dao techniques of other powers and gain the effect of learning from others. However, all of you still have to focus on your own cultivation. So, you just have to attend such listening sessions regularly. Li Xingfei and the rest's current realm, as well as the cultivation of Yu Hongyan and the rest, weren't suitable for people like Xiao Yan, Zhu Yi, Wang Lin, and Shi Tianhao to study the Taoist techniques of other sects on a large scale. They could deduce, analyze, and absorb the Taoist techniques of other sects for their own use. However, Their foundations were already solid. On the basis of ensuring the cultivation of their own sect's Taoist techniques, they could gain more knowledge and use it as a reference. Li Xingfei replied, "I understand, Master, don't worry." Wang Lin nodded and continued, "From today onwards, you can start to look for candidates for the third-generation direct disciples." Chapter 1040. The candidate for the third-generation direct disciples' first seat should be Fanga, Li Xingfei said. The person she was talking about was her direct disciple, Chen Fanga. Although he didn't enter the sect early, he had already shown extraordinary potential. Among the third-generation direct disciples, he was quite famous. Wang Lin naturally knew about this person. He nodded. "Give him more tests and keep training." Li Xingfei immediately nodded. "Yes, disciple understands." Wang Lin said, "After the next internal direct disciple competition, if he performs well, we will establish him as the third-generation direct disciple's first seat. You can also pass the Zhu Luan sacrificial sword to him." Chen Fanga had already reached the late stage of foundation establishment. After he was established as the first seat's first seat, the Zhu Luan sacrificial sword would naturally be passed on to him. And when Chen Fanga formed his gold core, the binding curse forbidden stone would also be passed on to him. At the same time, the first seat's magic weapon would also be put on the agenda. A treasure that had just been obtained and had yet to warm up would soon be passed on to someone else. It was depressing to talk about it, but Li Xingfei didn't feel this at all. She was calm, and Wang Lin was the same. Li Xingfei followed behind Wang Lin. They didn't break through the void. The master and disciple passed through the seven-colored bridge between the mortal forest residence and the main peak of Mount Yujing. They walked all the way up Mount Yujing. As they walked, a dark yellow path appeared under the feet of Wang Lin's great devil avatar. It was the Yellow Springs path. When Wang Lin took a step, the path under his feet returned to normal. When Li Xingfei took another step, the path turned into the Yellow Springs path again. Li Xingfei's expression was the same as usual. Her eyes were calm, but she was constantly trying to figure out the concept. Although she was Wang Lin's disciple for the longest time, it was rare for her to teach him verbally. She naturally had to firmly grasp the opportunity. The master and disciple continued on their way. After ascending Yujing Mountain, the Yellow Springs Road's Bilyang slope disappeared. The two of them walked towards the Tower of Scriptures one after the other. As he walked, he encountered a dark-skinned young man. This young man clearly had the characteristics of a prairie native. He was Zhu Yi's disciple, Irosa. Behind Hirosa was a beautiful woman. However, her expression was somewhat cold and stubborn. At this moment, this woman's cultivation had already formed the golden elixir, reaching the early golden elixir realm. From afar, he heard Irosa's voice. "Within 7 days, go down the mountain and collect a 9-revolution butterfly orchid, 10 tailless red fish, and 100 Duyuan insects. If you can't complete them, you don't have to return to the mountain." The girl said indifferently, "I can finish it in less than 7 days." When Li Xingfei heard this, she sighed inwardly. If others didn't say it, who would have imagined that this was a pair of master and disciple? It was as if they were enemies, and as a master, Rosa seemed to be deliberately making things difficult for his disciple. In the celestial sect of wonders where the relationship between master and disciple was relatively harmonious, it could be considered a rare anomaly. The 9-revolution butterfly orchid was a type of spirit herb produced in Mount Kunlun. It was extremely rare, and most of the places where it grew were relatively remote and hidden, making it difficult to find. Irosa didn't push things too far. This was indeed the flower's flowering season. But if a cultivator in the early golden elixir realm wanted to find this flower in the vast mountains, it would take a lot of effort. It wasn't difficult to find it, but to find it within 7 days would be a test. In particular, the task that Irosa assigned was not just to find the 9-revolution butterfly orchid. Finding the tailless red fish and the Duyuan insect was not easy either. Finding 1 or 2 would be easy, but finding 10 tailless red fish and 100 Duyuan insects would be quite difficult. The most outrageous thing was that these things could be found in Xianmen Tianzong, and Irosa himself was not in urgent need of them. But the cold girl didn't seem to have any objections to this, and even her gaze didn't waver. She was Irosa's personal disciple, Meng Honglu. She was a disciple that entered Xianmen Tianzong's sect for the third time 7 years ago. Later, she passed the direct disciple test and became a third-generation direct disciple of Qian Tian Palace. Her master at that time was Irosa. She didn't become a second-generation direct disciple, but a third-generation direct disciple. At that time, she once said that if she had known this, she would have chosen Yangqing's Nirvana Paradise as her master. Because at that time, the strongest of the second-generation direct disciples, Zhou Yunsong, was there. Of course, this was what she muttered in private, but at that time, Irosa was in the late stage of foundation establishment and was about to form his core. She didn't have any qi condensation cultivation, so even if she was muttering to herself, Irosa still heard it. When Irosa heard this, he didn't get angry. Instead, he called Meng Honglu over and asked her on the spot. Meng Honglu was silent for a moment, then said in front of Irosa, if she could choose, she wanted to become the disciple of the strongest. When Irosa heard this, he didn't get angry but laughed instead. The disciple can choose the master, and the master can naturally choose the disciple. If you aren't the most outstanding among your peers, what right do you have to demand that your master be the most outstanding? I want to be the most outstanding one, Meng Honglu replied. Irosa laughed disdainfully. Anyone can just say it. Meng Honglu pursed her lips and didn't say anything. Irosa glanced at her. If there's anything you want to say, feel free to say it. There's nothing you can't say here. Perhaps some people will think that your words are disgraceful, that you have no sense of seniority, that you don't know the immensity of heaven and earth, that you are stupid to contradict your master on the first day you become his disciple. But I won't. I just want to see if what you say is empty talk. I want to see if you can do what you said. When Meng Honglu heard this, she took a deep breath. Silently, she repeated, I want to be the most outstanding one. Irosa stared at her silently, then nodded. I'll wait and see. Since you are my disciple, I will naturally teach you everything I know. But how much you can learn will depend on yourself. From then on, Meng Honglu focused on learning under Irosa. But what kind of person was Irosa? Meng Honglu suffered under his tutelage, and the hardship she endured was definitely the greatest among the 3 generations of direct disciples. But Meng Honglu was indeed unyielding. No matter how Irosa made things difficult for her, she gritted her teeth and persevered. Not only did she want to accomplish her goal, she wanted to accomplish it well enough, better than what Irosa wanted. Irosa also never hid anything. He taught her everything he knew, and even went to Zhu Yi to ask him to test Meng Honglu in advance and teach her the Book of Tao and Virtue. As the first direct disciple of the 3rd generation, Meng Honglu did not disappoint Irosa. She became the first to form her gold core among the 3rd generation direct disciples, and her cultivation was also extraordinary. This stubborn pair of master and disciple lived together for many years. At the beginning, Yang Tai, Tan Yunqing, Zhuge Wanqiu, and even Li Xingfei were quite dissatisfied with Irosa's teaching methods. But under the circumstances that Zhu Yi did not interfere, Irosa insisted on doing things his own way. Meng Honglu did not say anything, nor did she raise any objections, so they could only let her do as she pleased. By now, Li Xingfei was even somewhat used to it. If one day, this pair of master and disciple suddenly fell in love with each other, she would feel that the whole world was not real. Irosa gave Meng Honglu a new task. Hearing Meng Honglu's reply, he didn't even turn his head as he said nonchalantly, "Oh, that's good. In that case, bring everything back to the mountain in 6.5 days." Meng Honglu's expression did not change at all. She calmly said, "Okay." Irosa led Meng Honglu forward, and when he saw Wang Lin and Li Xingfei, he immediately stopped and bowed. "Third martial uncle." Meng Honglu also bowed. This disciple greets third martial uncle, greets martial uncle Li. Dispense with the formalities. Wang Lin glanced at them. "Are you going to the scripture repository?" Irosa nodded. "I'm going to choose a divine ability for her to increase her strength. I plan on choosing the 9 heavens formless astral wind." In the sect, Wang Lin was in charge of the scripture repository. However, Rosa did not need to specially report to Wang Lin. The reason why he had made it clear was because he hoped that Wang Lin could give him some pointers and listen to his opinion. Wang Lin glanced at Meng Honglu and nodded. Your judgment is very accurate. Go on. When Rosa and Meng Honglu saw that Wang Lin and Li Xingfei were also walking towards the scripture repository, they simply moved to the side and let Wang Lin go first. Then, they and Li Xingfei followed behind Wang Lin. After glancing at Meng Honglu, Li Xingfei transmitted her voice to Rosa. She is very outstanding. Your painstaking efforts over the years have not been in vain. Rosa laughed nonchalantly. My favorite thing to do is to take care of thorns. However, she is quite stubborn. It will not be easy to break the thorns on her body. However, the more it is like this, the more interested I am. If she was a coward, I wouldn't even bother with her. All these years, Rosa had only had one direct disciple, Meng Honglu. On one hand, he was famous for his radical teaching methods, causing many junior disciples to shrink back when they wanted to take him as their master. On the other hand, the other junior disciples who had entered the heavenly heaven palace were not to his liking. Li Xingfei shook her head silently. If there really was a thorn, then amongst the second-generation direct disciples, Rosa was probably the biggest one. Han Yang's arrogance was hidden under his slipperiness. Most of the time he did things that others could not grasp. As Huang Zhenting grew older, although he was still straightforward, he was no longer as hot-headed as he had been in his youth. The only exception was this dark-skinned young man in front of him. He was obstinate and unruly, and he was still the same as before. In front of the elders of the sect, he would abide by the rules on the surface, but deep down he was still the same Rosa who would point a dagger at a person's head. Li Xingfei suddenly came to a realization. Right, how is Miaoying doing? I was in closed-door cultivation a while ago and haven't had the time to look for her yet. The person she was talking about was Su Yunxing's younger sister, Su Miaoying. Back then, after returning to the mountain with Zhu Yi and Su Yunxing, she had also entered the Xianmen Tianzong sect. However, in the sect, she had become her brother's martial niece. In the end, she had become a third-generation direct disciple, learning under the Heavenly Heaven Palace's second-generation head disciple, Yang Tai. You and I both know that Tai teaches disciples. Su Miaoying's progress is not bad. Rosa frowned. However, Su Yunxing still hasn't contacted her. His whereabouts are still unknown. Chapter 1041. Not long ago, among the earliest disciples of Xianmen Tianzong, Su Yunxing and Rosa were known as the twin pillars, the most outstanding figures among the second-generation disciples. At that time, the only rival in the eyes of the arrogant Rosa was Su Yunxing. Beneath Su Yunxing's humble appearance was an arrogant person, and in terms of opponents, only Eliorza could make him feel immense pressure. The two of them constantly competed with each other, winning and losing, chasing each other. At that time, it was a unique scene in Xianmen Tianzong. But as time passed, Xianmen Tianzong grew stronger and stronger, absorbing more and more geniuses into the sect. Although Su Yunxing and Rosa were still the top figures among the second-generation disciples, they were no longer as outstanding as before. This was naturally a joyous matter for the celestial sect of wonders as a whole, but for Rosa and Su Yunxing, they had to adjust their mentality. Otherwise, it would be hard to avoid feeling disappointed or even unbalanced. Dao Yuding was fine, as she was at the late stage of foundation establishment the moment she entered the sect, while they were still qi condensation cultivators. But for Tang Jun, Han Yang, Huang Zhenting, Zhou Yunsong, Yang Tai, Little Lin Tong, and the others who came later, it was more of a blow to them. Su Yunxing and Rosa were both proud people. Previously, they had been in the lead among the younger disciples of the sect, but later on, they were constantly being caught up to and even surpassed by others. This was undoubtedly a hurdle for them. Of the two prides of the past, one had gone missing, and there was no news of him, while the other had gone from being the strongest to being one of the strongest. But at this time, Rosa's mentality was very calm. Back then, when he was criticized by Meng Honglu behind his back, he did not get angry. Over the years, although Rosa was still arrogant, he was no longer the escaped slave of the grasslands he used to be. If it was when he was young and had yet to enter the celestial sect of wonders, he might have flown into a rage out of humiliation, and even drawn his sword against someone when he was made up like this. However, the current Irosa did not care. It wasn't that he had no initiative and lost his drive, but that he could now direct his drive and arrogance to the right path. During the Kunlun Mountain Dharma Assembly, he knew that he would most likely lose if he fought against Zhou Yunsong. However, he did not hate Zhou Yunsong. Instead, he made up his mind to work harder and improve himself. In the past, he was second only to Dao Yuding in the core formation realm. Now he had already advanced to the late stage of the golden elixir realm, faster than Lu Xiaofeng and Li Xingfei. Meng Honglu hoped to become the strongest among the third-generation disciples, but how could Rosa not want to become the strongest among the second-generation disciples? Even though Tang Jun, Han Yang, Zhou Yunsong, and the others kept appearing, even though they displayed potential that far surpassed Elosa's, Elosa had never given up on this idea. Instead, he did his best to advance towards his goal. He was still competitive, still sharp, and still proud. This was his conviction, and it had never wavered. The current Elosa naturally would not be like before. In his eyes, there was only Su Yunxing as an opponent, and no one else. However, he was still brooding over the fact that he had not heard from Su Yunxing for so many years. This had nothing to do with cultivation, but because of another person. Even if Elosa did not realize Zhuge Wanqiu's feelings for Su Yunxing back then, he had already understood it after so many years. With Elosa's personality, he naturally could not be happy with the fact that they were hanging around without understanding each other. He had never thought that he would not only have to compete with Su Yunxing on the path of cultivation, but also on the path of love. Li Xingfei looked at Elosa and sighed in her heart. She said, "Second martial uncle said that senior apprentice brother Su's situation is completely under his control. It's just that he will not be able to return to the mountain in the short term." Elosa's expression was slightly gloomy. "I know. I specially went to ask Master a few times, but Master still refused to tell me where Su Yunxing is, and what he is doing. Perhaps he is going to undergo some special training, or to complete some dangerous mission given by the sect," Li Xingfei guessed. "So it is not convenient for him to tell us the specific situation, and he has no way of contacting him." Elosa snorted and did not say anything else. As the group walked, two figures walked past them. When they saw Wang Lin and the others, they hurriedly stopped and saluted. Disciple greets third Martial Uncle Tianbi, Martial Uncle Tianqi. The person who came bowed to Wang Lin, Elosa, and Li Xingfei. He was a tall and slender young man with a calm and kind temperament. His facial features were handsome, but what was more special was that his hair and eyebrows were the color of frost. The person beside him was a young girl whose facial features were somewhat similar to his. Her eyebrows were as beautiful as a painting, and her eyes were lively. However, at this moment, she was also obediently bowing to Wang Lin and the others. This young girl's hair and eyebrows were the same color as the young man's, like frost. Wang Lin also had an impression of these two people. They were a pair of biological brother and sister. The older brother was called Yi Xinhui, and his master was the second-generation true disciple of the Qiantian Palace, Yang Tai. The younger sister was called Yi Xinxuan, and she was the second-generation true disciple of the desolate Heaven Valley, Zhuge Wanqiu. Like Meng Honglu, the two of them were disciples of the Celestial Gate 7 years ago, when Xianmen Tianzong opened the gate for the third time. At that time, the older brother was 15, and the younger sister was only an 8-year-old little girl. At that time, they did not look like this. The color of their hair was the same as most people, black. The current situation was because they were cultivating Dao techniques and stimulated their special constitutions, which gradually changed the color of their hair. The brother and sister both had a relatively rare type of wood spirit body, called the Jade Tree body, also known as the Jade Tree Silver body. Although it was not as good as the Pure Yang, Pure Yin, or Tang Jun's Azure Flame Emperor body, it had its own uses, and was not inferior to Dao Yuding and the others. Other than having a good innate talent, the brother and sister were also very diligent in their cultivation. In terms of cultivation speed, they were also the best among the third-generation true disciples. At ease, Wang Lin said calmly, and then continued to walk forward. Li Xingfei looked at them and smiled. Secretly bringing your younger sister to the Medicine Valley to get special treatment? A smile appeared on Yi Xinhui's face. This disciple does not dare. Before coming here, I have already reported to Master. Beside him, Yi Xinxuan lowered her head, a little embarrassed. The Medicine Valley was originally managed by Yang Qing, who had left the mountain to practice medicine. Knowing that she would not be able to return for a long time, she specially handed over the task to Lin Feng. Lin Feng had originally planned to hand the task to Xiao Yan. After all, his Fun Tianyao faction had the most alchemy disciples, but in the end, Xiao Yan smiled bitterly and refused. No one understood his group of monkeys better than him. If he let them manage the Medicine Valley, it would undoubtedly be like handing a flock of sheep to the wolves. In the end, the task of the Medicine Valley was handed over to Zhu Yi. As the younger generation disciples gradually grew up, these management tasks would naturally be undertaken by the younger generation disciples. Yi Xinhui had a natural wood spirit body and was very close to plants. Among the third-generation true disciples, he was the main one stationed in the Medicine Valley. Li Xingfei smiled and nodded, then left with Wang Lin. Ing Rosa also looked at Yi Xinhui and nodded. Both of them were from the Qiantian Palace, so he understood this young man very well. The other party was very outstanding, but his personality was not to his liking. Meng Honglu still had an indifferent look on her face. She only bowed to Yi Xinhui and his sister, then left with Ing Rosa. The Yi siblings had interacted with this fellow disciple quite a few times, so they naturally knew what kind of person she was. Thus, they did not take her cold attitude to heart. After bidding farewell to Wang Lin and the others, they continued walking towards the Medicine Valley. Brother, did martial uncle Tianbi give senior sister Honglu another difficult task again? Yi Xinxuan was much livelier now that they were not in front of the elders. She smiled and asked her brother. Yi Xinhui lightly flicked her forehead. Martial uncle Tianbi knows what he's doing. Let's not talk about it. Yi Xinxuan clutched her forehead and made a face at her brother. Seeing his sister's carefree expression, Yi Xinhui could not help but smile. He softly said to himself, "It's good to have a family." When he was 8 years old and his sister was only 1 year old, their parents passed away, leaving the two of them to depend on each other for survival. At a young age, he worked as a gardener in someone else's house, raising his sister who was both a brother and a father. When his sister was a little older, she washed clothes for others when she was still a child. That was in the manner of a wealthy family in the Great Qin dynasty. In the beginning, the master of the family was rather lenient. However, as the master's daughter gradually grew up, she began to bully Yi Xinxuan, who was her age. Yi Xinxuan, who had been obedient and sensible since young, did not mention this matter to Yi Xinhui for a long time. In the end, Yi Xinhui only found out about it himself. If that was the case, it would have been fine if the Yi siblings, who had been taken care of by the master of the family when they were young, endured it. Who knew that there was a descendant of the main branch of the family who liked young girls? He extended his claws towards Yi Xinxuan, who was gradually growing up. In the end, Yi Xinhui's brother, Yi Xinhui, immediately flew into a rage and stabbed him. This undoubtedly caused trouble. The brother and sister could only flee that night and hide in the forest. One day, when Yi Xinhui left the forest to sell firewood and some common medicinal ingredients, he accidentally learned of Xianmen Tianzong's deeds. Harboring a sliver of hope, he brought his sister to find a disciple site set up in the Great Qin dynasty, when Xianmen Tianzong opened its doors for the third time. In the end, after passing through layers of selection tests, they successfully entered Xianmen Tianzong's sect. The experiences before and after entering the sect were like two different worlds for the Yi siblings. Even today, when Yi Xinhui recalled the past, he still felt as if it was a lifetime ago. He involuntarily turned his head to look at the huge mysterious heaven treasure tree on Jade Capital Mountain. The huge crown that covered the sky was like his own sect, shielding everyone in the sect from wind and rain, giving them a brand new life. "It's so good to have a home," Yi Xinhui murmured. Yi Xinxuan turned his head to look at him. "Brother, what are you mumbling about?" Yi Xinhui came back to his senses and smiled. I'm saying, don't eat all the stacked nether grass in the medicinal valley later, or else I won't be able to answer to Master and Grandmaster. Brother, what are you saying? Yi Xinxuan was instantly indignant, while Yi Xinhui couldn't stop laughing. In the depository of scriptures, watching the siblings disappear into the entrance of the medicinal valley, Xiaoyan smiled at Zhu Yi and Shi Tianhao. Not bad. Zhu Yi and Shi Tianhao couldn't help but smile. Beside them, Wang Lin himself also had a faint smile on his face. All right, let's continue. Xiaoyan clapped his hands and looked at his junior brothers. Let's put the Supreme Wang Qingdao aside for now. What third junior brother mentioned just now seems very interesting. Chapter 1042. Xiaoyan looked at Wang Lin and said, in other words, the core of karma is that every cause has an effect, and every effect has a cause. When you know all the conditions, influencing factors, internal rules and connections of a matter, you can deduce a definite result of the matter, or use this information to deduce the cause from the effect and accurately trace back to what happened in the past. Similarly, by knowing the cause and effect, you can deduce what will happen in the future. The past and the future are undeniably displayed in front of you, and everything is actually destined from the beginning. We just have to follow the rules step by step. What we personally think of as chance and impermanence are all inevitable from the perspective of the world. We can't see through it because we are ignorant and know little? Wang Lin nodded. In the past, I received guidance from Zen Master Dade, and comprehended the true meaning of life and death. In the end, I comprehended the last realm of the Four Symbols realm, the realm of karma. There is a great power in Buddhism called the Three Lives Karma Curse. It unravels the secrets of the past, present, and future. It is known as the Vairocana palm, and the Buddhist kingdom in the palm. Although it is not a powerful magic that can be used directly in actual combat, it has its own unique uses. The meaning is to use the past as the cause to trigger the present effect, and then use the present as the cause to trigger the future effect. In this way, karma continues, and life and death are endless. This is the appearance of the circulation of the bewildering world. Wang Lin's expression was slightly strange. Buddhism has 9 senses or 9 senses. The 9th sense is known as the Ajura sense, also known as the Bodhi enlightenment, the Buddha nature trueness. With a single thought, it is omniscient in the past, present, and future, an existence that completely transcends time and space. Everyone else's expression also became strange. Shi Tianhao looked around and said, in other words, if someone cultivates this magic to the extreme, he doesn't need to be in the same era as us, and doesn't need to stand in front of us. He can also know what we are doing, what we are going to do, what we look like, and what we have done with just a thought. According to the Buddhist scriptures, the Gautama Buddha had reached this realm in the past, Zhu Yi said calmly, but that was most likely an exaggeration to put gold on the ancestral master's face. According to the core concept of Buddhism, no one in the world can be invincible. Only karma and karma are eternal. As long as Gautama Buddha himself is still in this world, he will be tied down by karma and karma. He is destined to be unable to reach that height, unless one day he completely transcends this world. At that time, when he looks back at the world, perhaps he can truly be omniscient and omniscient for 3 lifetimes. However, if there really is someone who can reach this stage, they wouldn't need to achieve the great Tao of karma like the Buddha. They would probably be able to achieve omnipotence in this world as well. Among the disciples of Xianmen Tianzong, Zhu Yi and Wang Lin had the deepest understanding of the Buddhist orthodoxy, and had the most knowledge. Zhu Yi shook his head. Therefore, even the Buddhists themselves admit that in the 3 lifetimes, the past and present are easy to grasp, but the future is the most difficult to control. Wang Lin said, but they also believe that it is because their cultivation is not deep enough, or that they do not have a clear grasp of the various rules that exist in karma. As long as they can completely understand the great Tao of karma, they can transcend everything and know everything. Li Xingfei listened to the conversation of Wang Lin and the others seriously, trying to comprehend it with her mind. However, when she heard this, she felt a little lost. If everything in the world is in karma, doesn't that mean that everything is predestined? The past is predestined, the present is predestined, and the future is also predestined? At the thought of this, Li Xingfei suddenly felt sorrow and despair. She, who had always been steady and polite, could not help but interrupt and ask, since everything is predestined, doesn't that mean we don't have to do anything? Xiao Yan and the others did not mind and turned to look at her. Wang Lin said unhurriedly, because you do not do anything now, you will get one result in the future. If you do something, you will get another result. The result will be different, but that is because the reason is different. Now that you know the reason, the result is inevitable. Li Xingfei breathed a sigh of relief. That is still determined by what I do now, what kind of future I will have in the future. Wang Lin nodded without batting an eyelid. That is true, but what determines what you do now? Li Xingfei blinked. My own thoughts. Wang Lin continued to ask, you have an idea now, put it into action, and get a result you want in the future. Then, what made you have this idea now? Li Xingfei opened her mouth to answer, but she suddenly paused. She could not say anything, and a look of realization and fear appeared in her eyes. You've thought of it. Wang Lin nodded. Your past experiences, the environment you grew up in, and many other factors have shaped your current personality and way of thinking. Your current personality and way of thinking, combined with your current environment and other factors, have determined your thoughts when facing a certain matter. Then this thought of yours, combined with the various factors in the future, will come together to get a result. The past, the present, and the future, apart from your thoughts, all other factors are the same as your thoughts. They have their own cause and effect. Wang Lin finally said, cause and effect continue, endless life and death, endless reincarnation, intertwining and superimposing, forming a vast and complicated world of living beings. This is the concept of the three worlds karma mantra of Buddhism, which is also what the Buddhists call the Great Tao of Karma. Using some words in the secular world, you can also call it fate. Li Xingfei was at a loss. This is... Once, when I first comprehended the karma realm, I also felt sorrow, unwillingness, despair, and then hatred just like you. After Wang Lin's great demon avatar brought Li Xingfei to the scripture tower, he went to find Lin Feng to open the gate of Star Sea, and entered the desolate ancient Star Sea to cultivate. At this moment, his main body looked at his disciple calmly. Tianqi, you have only just experienced it today, but I have been trying to figure out these principles all these years. Wang Lin turned to look at Xiao Yan, Zhu Yi, and Shi Tianhao. Their eyes flashed slightly, and they were a little solemn, but their expressions were calm. The Buddhist orthodoxy was mysterious, and the great Tao of karma had reached the extreme. It seemed omnipotent and omniscient, but they were not superstitious. These principles originated from the Buddha, but the Buddha did not necessarily mean that they were correct. If they had all cultivated the Buddhist Dharma to this stage, then they naturally had no doubts about it, and would see it as the foundation of their own beliefs and Zen hearts. But a pity that they were not. Even Zhu Yi and Wang Lin, who had the most knowledge of the Buddhist Dharma, were only references. I'm not afraid to laugh at you. My Yellow Springs fifth art already has some ideas, Wang Lin said slowly. Xiao Yan and the others' eyes lit up when they heard this. Oh, Wang Lin's own Yellow Springs secret art had already spawned the fourth art, Emperor Yan's Hall, before he had proven his primordial spirit Tao. Now that Wang Lin had proven his primordial spirit Tao for a long time, he also had some ideas about the fifth art. Wang Lin looked up, and a stone silently appeared above his head. The stone was flat, and its surface was smooth. It could vaguely reflect a person's figure, just like a mirror. This art is called the Stone of Three Lives, Wang Lin said silently. The Bridge of Helplessness led to Emperor Yan's Hall, and in Emperor Yan's Hall, Yin and Yang were judged. The karma of the past life was reflected in the present life, and the Stone of Three Lives reflected the next life. Hearing the name of this mystique, Xiao Yan, Zhu Yi, and Shi Tianhao immediately knew what Wang Lin's immortality art would look like. This was destined to be a mystique that even if Wang Lin created completely, he would not be able to fully comprehend and use it at his current cultivation level. This was because if this technique was completely perfected, it was very likely to be another elaboration of the Three Lives Karma Curse of Buddhism. To reach its peak, the computing ability and the amount of information needed would be an incomparably terrifying number. Within the framework of the great heaven primordial world, it was almost infinite. Wang Lin's gaze returned to Li Xingfei. But when I was studying this mystique, I suddenly had many doubts. Doubts about the great Tao of karma, doubts about the myriad principles of heaven and earth, doubts about the 3 lives karma curse, and doubts about my own stone of 3 lives mystique. Li Xingfei looked up at Wang Lin in surprise. Xiao Yan, Zhu Yi, Shi Tianhao, and the others were also interested. All of them looked at him. Slowly, Wang Lin said, "Some things are very difficult to explain with karma. I went through an experience when I was young. I'm sorry to say it. Back then, I was still a young boy who had just come of age. I had not yet set foot on the path of cultivation. I did not understand love and longing. Now that I think about it, it's all in the past. At that time, I vaguely thought about someone, but I only thought about it in my heart. I never put it into action. Only I knew about this. That person and I did not know each other, nor did we have any contact. I was unable to interfere with her actions in any way. She did not even know of my existence at all. I also did not deliberately stand on the path of her movements to wait for her. In fact, we were extremely far away from each other, not in the same village at all. And now that I think about it, I can also be sure that I did not do something unconsciously that would cause me to cross paths with her. At this moment, with the strength of Wang Lin's spiritual sense, it was very easy for him to check his memory and confirm these situations. One day, I desperately wanted to be able to see this person, but this desire only stayed in my heart. I still did not put it into action. But at this time, she suddenly appeared in front of me without any warning, passing by me. Wang Lin looked at the distant void outside the scripture depository. This person naturally had her own reasons for appearing in front of me, but I did not have any influence on her at all. Yet, my wish came true. In the past few years, I have specially investigated all the possible causes and effects that could be involved in this matter. But in the end, I can be sure that I, or anyone related to me, did not have any direct or indirect influence or interference with her actions. Now that Wang Lin had reached the primordial spirit realm, it would undoubtedly not be difficult for him to investigate the matters of the secular world, even if it had been more than 10 years. Li Xingfei murmured to herself, "Results will come from sincerity." This seems to be a coincidence and chance, but it is completely different from the coincidence and chance described in the explanation of the great path of karma. At that time, the effect now was not the result of my own past cause. Wang Lin said slowly, "If there is a cause, it is what the heart thinks. But can a mortal's thoughts and ideas interfere with the great path of karma and create results out of thin air? Although this kind of thing is extremely rare, in the long river of history, there have been many cases. My own personal experience is not the only one." Chapter 1043. Compared to a mortal's life, such an experience might not be common. Many people might not even encounter it in their entire lives. But in the long river of history, from the perspective of billions of people, it's not rare. Silently, Wang Lin said, "Does this kind of thing violate karma? If it doesn't, how can it be explained? This is what I'm puzzled about." Xiao Yan said, "It's true. I've heard that there were twin brothers who lived thousands of miles away from each other. One day, the elder brother drowned and died. At the same time, the younger twin brother was sitting peacefully at home when he suddenly had difficulty breathing and suffocated for no reason." Shi Tianhao nodded. "I've also heard that there was an old woman who went on a long journey with her only son. She met with an accident outside and died while climbing a mountain. Almost at the same time, the old woman's beloved jade pendant mysteriously shattered. If we cultivators might be able to sense it because of our bloodline magic power, but how can a mortal have such a sharp sudden inspiration? That jade pendant isn't some spiritual item." Xiao Yan followed up and said, "These things that we've heard of may be false rumors. We also didn't carefully verify it like you, third junior brother, and confirmed that we've eliminated all interfering factors. But this kind of thing isn't just one or two things. When the number reaches a certain level, It can't be explained as pure accidents. And these seemingly accidental things all violate the Buddhist Tao of karma to varying degrees. The Tao of karma can't be used to turn accidental things into inevitable things. Zhu Yi pondered for a moment and looked at Wang Lin, third junior brother. Although your karma realm is integrated with the Buddhist Tao of karma, it itself seems to be shaking the Tao of karma from the foundation. Xiao Yin and Shi Tianhao also looked at the white-haired young man in front of them. Although Wang Lin's karma realm was integrated with the Tao of karma, the closing of the gate to the karma realm and reversing the karma lines to suppress one's own karma was the opposite of the Buddhist three worlds karma curse. The karma in the timeline was not established. The cause fell behind the effect. Now forcefully reversing the effect would even change the past. Although it was a very superficial and even violent interference, it truly shook the principles of the three lives karma curse from the very foundation. After a moment of silence, Wang Lin said, I know. It's precisely because of this that the doubts in my heart became heavier and heavier when I was trying to comprehend the three life stones' divine ability. The causality realm and the three lives stone are both mystic arts that I created through my own comprehension. However, the two of them are in conflict. Wang Lin said slowly, when I close the gate to the realm of karma, it will reverse karma to a certain extent. However, I still don't fully understand the logic behind it. I can only make a preliminary judgment that this is the result of the great Tao contained in our sect's heavenly virtue scripture. Wang Lin said, I want to figure out the reason behind it. That's why I recalled what happened when I was young, and went back to verify it. Shi Tianhao smiled and said, Fortunately Zen Master Dade is not here. Putting aside the fact that their discussion was questioning Buddhism's great Tao of karma, Wang Lin's words earlier revealed that the heavenly virtue scripture had forcefully suppressed Buddhism. Hearing this, Wang Lin could not help but smile. I haven't told Zen Master Dade about these thoughts of mine. Xiao Yin gently rubbed the space between his eyebrows. There should be a reason for the contradiction. To be precise, it's not that there's a loophole in the Tao of karma. It can only be said that there are thousands of principles in the world, and the Tao of karma is not the only principle. Things that the Tao of karma cannot explain can be explained by other principles. However, Buddha's idea, or rather, Buddhism's original view, that one can be omniscient and omnipotent by comprehending the karmic force of karma, using the Tao of karma to explain the laws and principles of the entire world, as well as the changes of creation, is destined to fail. Zhu Yi said, for example, becoming a Buddha on the spot is indeed extraordinary. Its Tao of karma is also unique. In fact, although this Tao can't really understand all Dharma with one Dharma, it is extremely inclusive and can explain many Dharma practices. Many principles of heaven and earth can be turned into the Tao of karma and explained anew. From a certain point of view, if this Tao really reaches its limit, most of the great Tianyuan world is indeed within its scope, but it's still not everything. Therefore, practicing this Tao may be able to reach an extremely high level, but it's impossible to transcend this world with the current foundation. Zhu Yi's eyes narrowed slightly. Back then, Buddha went to the Sea of Death. Was this also one of the reasons? If there's a Buddhist cultivator who could maintain his Zen heart and seek further breakthroughs by himself after his understanding of the great Tao of karma was shaken, I'm afraid that only the founding ancestor could do so. Wang Lin said, It's hard to say what happened back then. There's such a possibility, but it could also be because of other things. Xiao Yin thought for a moment and said, Let's not spread today's discussion to Zen Master Dade's ears first. Wait until we've figured out the door, or at least have a general idea, then we'll tell Zen Master Dade. In the Tao of Buddhism, the strongest external magical power was the Mahavirokana palm, but for Buddhism's Zen martial arts ideology, it was only a method to subdue external demons. The core of Buddhism was always the Tao of karma, and the 5 Directions Buddha Sutras were closely related to this. Whether it was practicing the immovable Buddha Sutra, or the infinite light Buddha Sutra like Zen Master Dade, the core of Buddhism involved the Tao of karma. If this was shaken, the Buddhist cultivator's Zen heart was likely to be shaken as well. This was the foundation of Buddhism. If it was shaken, Even if it wasn't as miserable as when the Tao heart of the Taishu temple was broken, it wouldn't be good. Ever since Zen Master Dade entered Xian Gate Sky Sect as a guest elder, he has put in a lot of effort. Normally he is kind and does not compete with others. Even after Xiao Yan and the rest proved their primordial spirit, they were also very respectful to him. When Zhu Yi Wanglin and Shi Tianhao heard this, they all nodded and said, "Of course." Li Xingfei, who was at the side, quickly bowed, indicating that she had heard Xiao Yan's instructions and would definitely not leak the information. There are thousands of great Tao in the world, and they are really wonderful beyond words. Each has its own mystery. Xiao Yan couldn't help but praise, and the faces of Zhu Yi and the others all showed a deep expression of the same feeling. In the following days, besides teaching their own disciples, Xiao Yan and the others focused on practicing the Tao of their own Heavenly Virtue Sutra. Then, using this as a foundation, they deduced the Tao of Supreme Wangqing, deduced the Tao of Yin and Yang of the Void, figured out the Tao of Karma of Buddhism, and comprehended the Tao of other sections. The four of them had a very rich harvest. Not to mention whether there was an increase in magic power, but in the cultivation of Tao, as well as the understanding of the great Tao of heaven and earth, they had made great progress. Lin Feng saw their performance and felt gratified in his heart. The thing that made him most gratified was that the four disciples had their own understanding of the Yin and Yang Unity Sutra that he had taught them. Their understanding was not exactly the same as Lin Feng's explanation of the Yin and Yang Unity Sutra, but it had incorporated their own understanding of the great Tao of heaven and earth, allowing Lin Feng to look forward to their future development. After leaving the Brontosaurus clone and the divine god of battle clone on the mountain, Lin Feng's main body rose and traveled across the rift, before finally arriving at the Eastern Ocean. He passed through the entrance of the Yinghai Passage and entered the Yinghai Ocean, walking in the illusions of the ocean. With a thought from Lin Feng, the white clouds in front of him dispersed, revealing a vast black ocean that seemed to be floating in the air. The waves were over 100 zhang high. Even though there was no wind, it served as a contrast to the giant island at the center of the Black Ocean, which was none other than Mount Penglai. The island had been refined by Lin Feng. Thus the surrounding ocean was no longer an obstacle to him. Lin Feng ascended the island as if he was walking on flat ground, and arrived at the hall on the mountain. In the empty hall, there was only a tall youth sitting cross-legged. Silently, he breathed in and out and cultivated. This youth was naturally the human youth of the past, Luo Yao. Now he was a member of the Yudu demon race, Grand Luo Yudu. There was a faint glow around his body. His corporeal body was still not a real corporeal body, but one formed by the heavenly scarlet golden pearl. However, after many years of cultivation, Grand Luo could already control this transformation. Although there was still a time limit, Grand Luo's movements were much more free. For example, he had changed his appearance to that of a human, instead of that of a Yudu beast. Even though he had accepted his origins and recalled many things, the origin heavenly immortal still cherished his life as a human. The human form he was currently in was still that of a youth of 15 or 16 years old 7 years ago in the Great Thousand World, before his body had changed. Seeing Lin Feng enter, Grand Luo hurriedly stopped his cultivation and bowed. "Master Lin, dispense with the formalities." Lin Feng waved his hand and sized up Grand Luo. Grand Luo was currently in the form of the heavenly scarlet golden pearl, and still had the cultivation of a late-stage demon king. If he wanted to achieve the realm of the indestructible demon soul, he had to have a real corporeal body again. Both Lin Feng and Grand Luo knew that to Grand Luo, the most perfect corporeal body would be to find a way to reconstruct the body of Yudu. However, that wasn't easy, especially since there wasn't a second Yudu beast in the Great Thousand World. Not to mention taking over a body, they didn't even have a reference sample to create a temporary replacement. However, both Lin Feng and Grand Luo knew that the Yudu beasts weren't extinct. On the contrary, they could descend upon the Great Thousand World again at any time. That was why Lin Feng and Grand Luo weren't in a hurry. Although Grand Luo had no hope of achieving the indestructible demon soul, he still cultivated patiently and tempered his magic power. He built an incomparably solid foundation, and prepared to soar into the heavens in the future. Compared to the temporary stagnation in his cultivation, The biggest problem for Grand Luo was actually loneliness and confusion about his own future. Lin Feng didn't have any good solutions to that. He once suggested that Grand Luo should simply stay on Jade Capital Mountain, but Grand Luo rejected it. Loneliness wasn't what he wanted, but before he could clearly determine his future, he would rather endure it. Luckily, cultivating on Mount Penglai was beneficial to him, and it didn't delay anything. This kind of training in solitude actually helped him improve his willpower and discern his own heart. After Lin Feng pointed out some of the problems Grand Luo faced in his cultivation, Grand Luo started to meditate and cultivate again. Lin Feng lightly clapped his hands, and the entire Mount Penglai rumbled. 9 streams of pure immortal energy circulated within the mountain, incomparably pure, incomparably beautiful, gathering together towards the great hall on the mountain. Chapter 1044. The 9 strands of immortal qi gathered in front of Lin Feng, who was in the palace on the immortal mountain. With the 9 qis on him, Lin Feng's body seemed to be shrouded in a layer of 9-colored halo. He formed a seal with both hands and changed his hand sign. Then he took a step back and escaped from the 9-colored halo. However, a faint light silhouette of him remained where he was, intertwining with the 9-colored halo and gradually showing signs of fusing. That light silhouette was faint and barely visible in the air. One could only vaguely make out that its facial features were similar to Lin Feng's. The light silhouette closed its eyes with a calm expression. Silently, it formed a seal with both hands and stood where it was. The 9 qis of the immortal mountain circled around its body, finally turning into a 9-colored divine light. It was Mount Penglai's unique 9 qis Great Golden Hall Vacuum Divine Light. This divine light merged with the light silhouette that Lin Feng had left behind, causing the light silhouette to become more and more condensed. The 9 strands of immortal qi on Mount Penglai continuously gathered towards this light silhouette. It was as if 9 huge chains were wrapped around the light silhouette, or as if they were connected to the 9 paths of heaven and earth. Lin Feng sat down in a lotus position. As he formed a seal with both hands, streams of magic power were infused into the light silhouette. The light silhouette that was originally the height of a normal person began to grow taller. Soon it exceeded 10 feet. Its height gradually slowed down, but it was still growing. I used the 9 strands of vital qi condensed from the essence of heaven and earth on Mount Penglai to refine this clone. It also coincides with the meaning of heaven and earth are me. Lin Feng thought. If it's the same as what I expected, it means that my previous deduction was correct. However, refining this clone would take a long time. It could not be completed in a short time. Fortunately, Lin Feng was not in a hurry at all. The process of refining the clone was also very beneficial for his own cultivation of the Tao. The refinement of the clone was mainly on Mount Penglai. Later on, when it was on the right track, it would not matter even if he left Mount Penglai for a period of time. After Zenith Luo ended his cultivation, he looked curiously at the light silhouette in front of Lin Feng. Master Lin, this is... Lin Feng smiled. This is me using the 9 strands of Mount Penglai to refine a clone. However, I'm still in the process of figuring it out, and some things are not yet complete. He looked at the grand heavenly immortal and smiled, saying, once this method is perfected, I'll teach it to you. You can use the same method to refine a clone. This method shouldn't be limited to the situation where your true body doesn't have a physical body at the moment. With such a clone, it'll be much easier for you to move around. Zenith Luo smiled in embarrassment. Of Master Lin is joking. Of you must. Of. Use your demon power to figure it out on the side, it's good for your training. Lin Feng smiled and shook his head, his attention returning to the light and shadow in front of him. Zenith Luo sat cross-legged on the ground as well. He extended a strand of qi and carefully wrapped it around the clone Lin Feng was refining, silently probing and sensing it. Zenith Heaven obeyed and also sat cross-legged on the ground, sending out a thread of demonic energy, and carefully wrapping it around the clone that Lin Feng was currently refining, quietly probing and sensing. After a while, Zenith Luo sat cross-legged on the ground as well. He extended a strand of qi and carefully wrapped it around the clone that Lin Feng was refining, Lin Feng then pushed it forward. As time continued to pass, when the height of the shadow in front of Lin Feng exceeded 30 feet, Lin Feng faintly smiled, his two hands coming together and then pushing forward. As time passed, when the height of the clone in front of Lin Feng exceeded 10 feet, Lin Feng smiled and made a hand seal before pushing it forward. The clone trembled slightly before returning to calmness. Meanwhile, Lin Feng himself stood up. Master Lin, you're leaving? Zenith Luo opened his eyes and looked at Lin Feng. Lin Feng nodded. What comes next is some grinding. When this clone grows to almost 90 feet tall, I'll come back and continue refining it. He turned and walked out of the palace. Focus on your cultivation from now on. When he reached the palace's entrance, he stopped and turned to look at Zenith Luo. Slowly, he said, an opportunity might appear before you at any time. When it does, you'll need to be strong enough to grasp it. Zenith Luo took a deep breath and said in a deep voice, Zenith Luo understands. Master Lin, don't worry. Lin Feng exited the great hall, stepping on the void and walking between heaven and earth. He looked at the enormous Mount Punglai, looked at the 9 invisible streams of air converging together into the great hall, and above the great hall, a 9-colored divine light faintly illuminated the heaven and earth. The great Tao of all things in the world is truly filled with endless mysteries. Lin Feng smiled. The more I know, the stronger this feeling becomes. He turned and flew away, traversing through the Ying Sea. After flying for who knows how long, an enormous celestial mountain appeared in front of Lin Feng. In the distorted space around the celestial mountain, there seemed to be tens of millions of transparent jade plates floating, crystal clear and smooth. Each of the jade slabs was extremely huge. They were rectangular and each was half an acre in size. They were stacked together and spread out at the same time, wrapping around the immortal mountain like a sphere. With a point of Lin Feng's finger, the tens of millions of transparent jade slabs started to move, opening up a gap like a door, allowing Lin Feng to enter. This immortal mountain that was not inferior to Mount Punglai was naturally Yingzhou. Compared to the secret of Mount Punglai, everyone knew that Yingzhou had fallen into Lin Feng's hands. Some of the resources produced by Yingzhou were like the resources in the mystic heaven realm. They had become powerful bargaining chips for Lin Feng. Most of the time, it was more convenient than using force. A large number of resources were also supplied to Xianmen Tianzong for their own use, boosting the sect's strength. Among the 3 mountains in the Ying Sea, Yingzhou had the most and the strongest illusions. Apart from being an important place for resources, it was also an important place for Xianmen Tianzong's disciples to train. The illusions here could play an important role in the training of the younger disciples. Lin Feng swept his gaze across Yingzhou. As his eyes moved, a few streams of light naturally flew up from the immortal mountain and landed in front of Lin Feng. With a flick of his sleeve, he collected these items and landed beside a sweet spring. This was naturally the Yingzhou Immortal Mountain's jade spring that could nourish Dharma treasures. At the moment, 2 huge black shadows were floating in the spring water. According to normal standards, it's long enough. Lin Feng smiled and shook his head. However, there's no harm in waiting a little longer. After saying that, he turned around and left Yingzhou. Lin Feng exited the Ying Sea and walked above the East Sea. His line of sight looked towards the northeast. That was the direction of another realm passageway that connected the vast land of the divine continent and infinite wasteland. Time waits for no man, a storm is coming. I wonder what will be the fuse that will ignite a new war between the 2 worlds. He turned around and headed west. His footsteps crossed the vast ocean and landed on land again. He passed through the territory of the Great Zhou dynasty, and finally stopped at the old site of the Great Thunderclap Monastery. Looking at the dilapidated ruins, Lin Feng's expression was calm. Emperor Ruhuang, you comprehended the Tao of karma in the past, and improved your strength. You became a Buddha immediately and established the foundation of the Great Thunderclap Monastery. You're truly a hero of your generation. To you, are the millions of Buddhist believers in the world and the Buddhist orthodoxy that you single-handedly established not interested in worldly possessions and flesh. Lin Feng shook his head, his gaze turning, looking towards the empty sky in the southeast direction, quietly saying, I still have things to do recently, so I won't be going to your place to sit for a while. It's rude of me to pass by and not enter. The sky in the southeast was still empty, but a voice suddenly sounded. Master of the Mystic Gate, you're too kind. The Great Zhou Dynasty and I welcome your presence at any time. Lin Feng nodded. You're too kind. After saying that, he put his hands behind his back and walked away. He disappeared into the void and continued heading west. In the distant plain mountain in the southeast of the Great Thunderclap Monastery ruins, in the Great Zhou Dynasty's capital, Tianjing City, silently, Emperor Liangpan of Zhou sat on the dragon throne in the main hall of the palace. His fingers gently stroked the armrest of the dragon throne, and he remained silent for a long time. In the past few years, compared to when the Great Zhou Dynasty was rapidly expanding, it was much more low-key. It was no longer as aggressive and domineering as before. To say that it was behaving with its tail between its legs would be a bit of an exaggeration. But without a doubt, it was much more cautious in its actions. Especially when facing Xianmen Tianzong. It was naturally impossible to retreat without a bottom line. If that happened, the Great Zhou Dynasty's unity and the people's hearts would all scatter. But its style of doing things had indeed gone from radical to conservative. When facing the Qin dynasty and other forces, the Great Zhou Dynasty's attitude was still unyielding. It only stopped its steps of active expansion and switched from offensive to defensive. After a few years of hiding its strength, biding its time and careful planning, the Great Zhou Dynasty slowly regained its footing. But up until now, the Great Zhou Dynasty still maintained a restrained attitude when it came to external relations. But this didn't mean that the ruler and ministers of the Great Zhou Dynasty had given up on improving themselves. They were just patiently waiting for the opportunity to rise up again and swallow everything. The next war between the two worlds is an opportunity. Under the torrential situation, no one can completely control the direction of the situation. Liangpan's gaze was profound. If we can't grasp this opportunity in the war between the two worlds, then we can only wait for the moment when Xianmen Tianzong and Taishu Temple directly fight. If we can't grasp these two opportunities, then the situation is truly worrying. In front of him appeared an illusion of light. In the illusion, there was a handsome middle-aged man with a golden crown on his head, white hair at his temples, sitting cross-legged. It was the Great Zhou Dynasty's Xuanji Marquis Zhu Hongwu. Zhu Hongwu opened his eyes at this time. His eyes flashed with a frightening light. He calmly said, "There will definitely be a battle between Xianmen Tianzong and Taishu Temple." The Great Zhou Emperor Liangpan said, "The opportunity is right in front of us. We have to have enough strength to grasp it. Before, we hoped that the war between the two worlds would come as late as possible. That way our Great Zhou can prepare more and more easily. But now we hope that the war between the two worlds will come as early as possible. Otherwise, our opponents will advance faster than us. Only this kind of unexpected event that no one can control can bring us an opportunity." Liangpan's expression was calm. "This is very sad and also very humiliating. But it is a fact that we must face." Zhu Hongwu lowered his head. "This subject is guilty." Liangpan shook his head. "It is not a crime of war. Hongwu, you don't need to take it to heart. It is just that you must speed up the process of breaking through to the Tao integration realm. The stronger our Great Zhou is, the more likely we will be to grasp the opportunity when it comes." Silently Zhu Hongwu replied, "Reporting to your majesty, this subject has already found the way." Chapter 1045. Liangpan looked at Zhu Hongwu. "Hongwu, you have been stuck in the primordial spirit incarnation realm for too long, but it has also allowed you to accumulate a lot of resources. With your talent and the accumulated resources of the Great Zhou Dynasty, refining your spirit to return to the void, returning to the void, and merging with the Tao should be a matter of time. But now that time is tight, you might be at a disadvantage if you put in all your effort to break through." Zhu Hongwu said, "Please don't worry, your majesty. I know my own situation well. Pressure is always motivation. The more pressing the external environment, the faster I will break through. If not for the pressure from Xianmen Tianzong, I would have spent more time and energy to reach the void and fuse with the Tao. Zhu Hongwu's skin was like white jade, shimmering with light. His eyes were like the deep sea, deep and quiet but also sparkling. He said calmly, "That unfilial son has attained the primordial spirit Tao and used the power of his master, the master of the Xianmen sect, to achieve great victories in Shu Mountain and Tianhuang continent. Now he is delusional enough to think that he can go against the rules and do things that are fatherless and childless. In the past 5 years, he has returned to the Marquis residence every year, wanting to do something disgraceful. But because I was in seclusion in the grotto heaven, I returned empty-handed. But every time he came, he disrespected his elders, his mother, and his brothers. He was extremely arrogant and despotic. Such an unfilial son deserves to be killed." Liang Pan said, "Of course I know about this. But you were in seclusion a few years ago, so I didn't tell you so as not to disturb you." Zhu Hongwu stood up and bowed. "Thank you for your understanding, Your Majesty. But although I had great gains in seclusion, I reached a bottleneck at the last moment. After I came out of seclusion, I heard the news and successfully broke through the bottleneck. Now I'm only one step away from the void and fuse with the Tao. This is something that unfilial son would never have dreamed of." The movements of his fingers seemed to contain a mysterious rhythm. "If that unfilial son comes again, I will capture him and teach him a lesson." Liang Pan said, "In these years your son Zhu Yi should not have stagnated. He should have improved. We're in a delicate situation right now. Hongwu, you have to be patient for now. Returning to the void integration stage is more important." Zhu Hongwu replied, "If I capture and kill that unfilial son, my mind will be clear. I'm afraid I can immediately return to the void and merge with the Tao and end that unfilial son one-on-one. Based on the personality of the celestial sect master, I'm afraid he won't interfere." Liang Pan shook his head. "We still have to prevent any accidents, especially now that the master of the celestial sect has his eyes on the demon race and the Taishu temple. This is an opportunity for the Zhou dynasty. I know that Zhu Yi has taken the initiative to visit you several times and disobeyed you, making you unhappy, but a new war between the two worlds may break out at any time. We must be prepared." After a moment of silence, Zhu Hongwu respectfully replied, "This subject obeys." Liang Pan asked, "Hongwu, will it affect your breakthrough to the Tao integration realm if I stop you?" Zhu Hongwu shook his head. "Your Majesty, your decree, the development of the Zhou dynasty, is above my personal honor. Although I'm unwilling, I won't be hindered by this. Even if I don't capture and kill that unfilial son, I have the confidence to return to the void and merge with the Tao, and it won't take long. However, there are still some concepts that I need to study, and I can't do it in one go." Suddenly, a ball of light appeared above his head. The light was so condensed that it seemed to be solid, as if there were many real worlds. Every world was in the shape of a wheel, and there seemed to be Buddhas sitting in it, chanting the great Tao. Countless worlds formed an even larger wheel, which slowly rotated above Zhu Hongwu's head. Countless worlds, countless Buddhas. Zhu Hongwu clenched his fists lightly, and the huge wheel above his head rotated even faster. He seemed to be using his own power to rotate the wheel of fate for the world. The huge wheel was condensed from Zhu Hongwu's martial will, and it seemed to represent the laws of the heavenly Tao. It decided the fate of all living beings, and its words were the law, unquestionable and undefiable. Liang Pan looked at the martial will that Zhu Hongwu had manifested and nodded. Using Buddhism's karma to understand all living beings, using the wheel of heaven to carry them, using the majesty of the world to rule over all living beings, and turning the wheel of life and death for all living beings in the world. Hongwu, your martial path is finally about to reach great success. Zhu Hongwu knelt on the ground. Your Majesty, I'm turning this wheel to support the Zhou dynasty. It's not easy to merge the three orthodoxies of Buddhism, Heavenly Gates and Grand Emperor. Liang Pan said. However, if I directly look and sense it now, I can indeed find some areas that are not in harmony. You really need more time to study and study. Zhu Hongwu answered. These three orthodoxies indeed have their unique areas, and I can't say that I've completely merged them. However, there's no need for this. I only need to choose the concepts that suit me. Liang Pan said, "This is a matter of course." He then looked at the huge wheel of heaven above Zhu Hongwu's head and frowned slightly. The problem seems to be with the Buddhist path of karma? Zhu Hongwu nodded. The path of karma itself is rather complicated. Back when we annihilated the Tempest Temple, the Mahavairokkana Sutra of the 5 Rulai Sutras was lost. The Immovable Buddha Sutra also lacks the general principles, and the Immovable Lord's Secret 10,000 Techniques fundamental seal. Therefore, I'm still lacking in the study of the Buddhist path of karma. However, I've obtained the Immovable Lord's Secret 10,000 Techniques fundamental seal from the Taishu Temple. I've already gained a deeper understanding of the path of karma. With a little more time to accumulate, I'll be able to succeed. At that time, I'll also be able to advance into the realm of path integration. Liang Pan sighed. It's a pity that the Mahavairokkana Sutra has been completely lost since the war between the two worlds 4,600 years ago. I heard that even the Golden Cicada doesn't have a complete copy. It lacks the general principles and the Mahavairokkana Sutra 5th seal. If you have this magical power, Hongwu, your strength will be able to go up another level. Moreover, with the complete 5 Rulai Sutra, it'll be even easier for you to break through to the realm of path integration. Liang Pan's gaze was calm. The Tsungtian Dao Jian has also fallen into the hands of Xianmen Tianzong. It should contain the inheritance of the ancient Heavenly Gate's Great Nine Heavens Divine Sword. If it falls into your hands, I believe it'll be helpful for you to comprehend the Grand Heavenly Dao. Zhu Hongwu said, "There'll be opportunities in the future, Your Majesty." Liang Pan waved his hand. "You'll have to bear with the matter regarding your son, Zhu Yi, for now." Zhu Hongwu bowed and replied, "Your Majesty, since you've spoken, I'll let that unfilial son live for a few more days. Continue your cultivation. When you've succeeded, I'll celebrate for you." Liang Pan nodded. Zhu Hongwu's silhouette gradually disappeared before his eyes. "I thank Your Majesty for your kindness." Liang Pan sat cross-legged on the dragon throne. He looked at the golden table in front of him in silence. After a while he said faintly, "Come in." A monk who looked like a middle-aged man appeared in the main hall. He put his palms together and bowed to Liang Pan, who was high up in the air. "The Kong greets Your Majesty." The person who came was the former upper echelon of the Great Thunderclap Monastery. He was an expert of the Golden Body second level of Buddhism, Monk De Kong. His expression was tranquil and peaceful. His body was shimmering with Buddha's light, showing his profound attainments in the Dharma. However, in the eyes of an expert like Liang Pan, he could tell that his current situation wasn't good. 7 years ago in the vast Thousand World, during the Battle of Yingxi, Monk De Kong suffered continuous heavy injuries in the core environment of Yingzhou Celestial Mountain. The Rulai Dharmakaya that he cultivated from Bukong to Rulai Sutra was almost completely shattered. That time, he had comprehended the relic Pure Land of the Buddhist senior expert, Zen Master Zhiguang, through the Celestial Mountain's illusory realm. After that, Monk De Kong only needed to polish himself for a period of time to reach the Golden Body third level of Buddhism. It was almost a done deal. However, under the situation of continuous injuries, it was already a great fortune that he didn't fall back to the Golden Body first level. However, if he wanted to break through to the Golden Body third level, the hope was already extremely slim. Not only was it completely hopeless in the short term, even in the long term, if he didn't have any special opportunities, he would almost be cut off from improving. Such a loss could not be said to be small. Liang Pan asked, "Zen Master, what's the matter?" Silently, Monk De Kong said, "This poor monk's senior brother from the same sect in the past, Zen Master Dade, has been serving as a guest in Xianmen Tianzong." Liang Pan didn't say anything. He naturally knew about this matter. After Zen Master Dade entered Xianmen Tianzong, he contributed a lot. When Lin Feng and his disciple were killed in the ancestral land, Zen Master Dade helped to stop the Shi family's head, Shi Wu. After Xianmen Tianzong took control of the Xiantian realm, Zen Master Dade had been guarding there. After that, during the battle to destroy the Xiantian realm, he even helped the Supreme Elder of Shushan to remove the falling rocks and get injured. Monk De Kong continued, All these years, senior brother Date has been looking for other people from the same sect in the past. This poor monk received news that he has recently gotten in touch with another of this poor monk's senior brother, Zen Master Danning. Danning? Liang Pan's expression didn't change. I remember that he was the Great Thunderclap Monastery's Sutra Depository's first seat in the past, right? He's also an eminent monk of the Golden Body second level like you. Back then, he was regarded as the person who could reach the Buddhist Golden Body third level the fastest. Monk Dekong nodded. Senior brother Danning's cultivation is even higher than this poor monk's. He's obsessed with Dharma and usually guards the Sutra Depository. He doesn't care about worldly affairs and wholeheartedly wants to restore the Vairocana Sutra. Back then he didn't really agree with the abbot's thoughts and had a good relationship with this poor monk. But he's still brooding over the destruction of the Great Thunderclap Monastery. This poor monk has been in contact with him all these years. Over the years his attitude has softened a lot. But this time, senior brother Date has found him, adding a lot of variables for no reason. After thinking about it, Liang Pan shook his head slightly. Don't stop him. Let him be for the time being. I believe that Zen Master Danning will not make a decision in a short time. After this, tell him about the 2 golden bodies of the Buddha's disciples in our dynasty. With these golden bodies, it'll be more beneficial for him to restore the Vairocana Sutra. Monk Dekong put his palms together. This poor monk obeys. At this moment, on the top of White Cloud Mountain, a few figures were moving. The person in the lead was an old man with his eyes closed. He was Daoist Lord. Opposite him was an old man with white hair and beard. It was Shoichi Dashin. At this moment, Shoichi Dashin's body was flashing with the mysterious and indescribable Taishu mystic light. Daoist Lord's hand seals were constantly changing. His expression was slightly solemn, as if he was trying something. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.